möchte ich Sie ganz herzlich begrüßen zu unserer Veranstaltung der Initiative an der Basis. Wir sind sehr dankbar, dass Sie gekommen sind, um unseren Anliegen zuzuhören, für Ihr Interesse, dass Sie so aufmerksam waren und die Veranstaltung gefunden haben, die Mühe auf sich genommen haben, sich anzumelden und hierher zu kommen. Ganz herzlichen Dank unsererseits. Wir sind die Initiative an der Basis. Wir sind Lehrer, Erzieher, Sozialarbeiter, Psychologen, Polizisten, Justizmitarbeiter, Ehrenamtliche und natürlich auch säkulare Migranten. Was wir täglich in der Flüchtlingshilfe und in der Arbeit mit Migranten erfahren, macht uns betroffen und sehr besorgt. Deshalb haben wir sehr lange darüber diskutiert und einen Forderungskatalog auf unsere Website gestellt. Auf dieser Website finden Sie auch die Videos der heutigen Veranstaltung, sodass Sie die Argumente nochmal nachverfolgen können und sich Zeit nehmen können, um sich ein Bild von den Themen zu machen, die heute Abend aufs Tablett kommen. Es sind auch Gesichter da, die schon bei unserer Veranstaltung mit der Werteunion da waren. Auch dort war man dankenswerterweise bereit, uns zuzuhören. Ganz herzlichen Dank. Wir begrüßen ganz herzlich auch die alternativen Medien, die uns begleiten. Sonst wären wir stumm, weil wir in unserem Internetauftritten auf Facebook bei jeder Veranstaltung abgeschaltet werden, weil unsere Listen zerstört werden und weil wir jetzt auch daran gehen müssen, eigene Websites zu betreiben, weil wir zunehmend blockiert werden und angegriffen werden. Es ist unfassbar, dass Menschen aus der ganzen Welt zusammenkommen, denen eigentlich das gleiche Anliegen ganz, ganz arg am Herzen liegt. Wir haben aus London Vido Wiz. Dann haben wir aus London Mimsi Wiz. Ganz herzlichen Dank für das Anreisen. Wohlgemerkt. Dann ganz von weit her aus Kanada, Armin Narabi. Ein Supertrack, werden Sie noch hören. Nach Berlin nach Hause gekommen ist aus London Kian Kamanchai. Auch er muss sonst sein Geld woanders verdienen, aber seinem Herzensanliegen widmet er jede Freizeit. Dann unser Gast am weitesten hier aus Australien, Harris Sultan. Dann zuletzt noch Mohammed Hisham aus Ägypten. Also wir sind wirklich sehr dankbar, dass ihr eure Stimmen erhebt, dass ihr so mutig seid, euch einzusetzen für uns hier in Deutschland. Denn alle diese Menschen, wie sie da sitzen, sie waren richtig fromme Muslime. Sie haben den Hijab angezogen, sie haben gebetet, sie waren Fundamentalisten, sie waren richtig fromme Muslime. Und irgendwann ist etwas mit ihnen passiert. Sie haben sich tief in die Fundamente des Islam hineinversenkt. Heute, und Sie werden es uns erzählen, wie Sie dazu gekommen sind, bezeichnen Sie sich als Ex-Muslime. Damit setzen Sie sich in der islamischen Welt, auch in Deutschland natürlich, es ist nicht leicht, einfach gegen die eigene Herkunft zu leben, gegen die eigene Tradition zu leben, gegen die eigene Gesellschaft zu leben und die eigene Gesellschaft zu provozieren. Das ist also ein inneren Mut, den wir im Westen bislang nicht aufbringen mussten. Sie machen uns darauf aufmerksam, dass wir in Deutschland dringend diskutieren müssen über den Islam und über das Verhältnis von Islam und offener Gesellschaft, ob da eine Gemeinsamkeit hergestellt werden kann oder ob die Unvereinbarkeit bestehen bleibt. Diese Diskussion muss in Deutschland geführt werden, wenn wir ein offenes, freiheitliches Land bleiben wollen. Und in diesem Sinne In diesem Sinne übergebe ich jetzt. Wir haben uns gedacht, er ist ein Berliner Kind, er fängt in unserer Sprache an, das macht es uns einfach und deswegen kann er auch sich selber vorstellen. Herzlich willkommen, Kian.
Ja, vielen Dank. Dankeschön, Christine. Vielen Dank fürs Kommen. Ich bin ausgesprochen glücklich, dass ich hier auch Gesichter wiedererkenne, die ich aus den sozialen Medien kenne. Ich sehe hier vorne welche und es ist toll, dass aus der virtuellen Welt tatsächlich Menschen dann hierher gekommen sind, um an dieser einmaligen Ex-Muslim-Konferenz teilzunehmen. Die Initiative an der Basis und meine Wenigkeit, wir haben diesen Event ins Leben gerufen, weil wir diese Notwendigkeit gesehen haben. Es ist das erste Mal, dass Ex-Muslime zusammenkommen, die tatsächlich vorher praktizierende Muslime waren und sich entschieden haben, irgendwo in ihrem Leben dann aufzuhören mit dem Islam und nicht nur stillschweigend sich zurückzuziehen, sondern aktiv gegen die islamische Ideologie zu sprechen. Und ich bin dankbar auch für die Anwesenden hier von Harris Sultan, Mohammed Hisham, der hat eine ganz dramatische Geschichte. Der Arme wurde zu einer TV-Show in Ägypten eingeladen, hat sich als Atheist vorgestellt, wurde dann in eine Diskussion verwickelt mit einem Kleriker von der Al-Azhar-Universität, der einflussreichsten sunnitischen Universität in der islamischen Welt. Er wurde noch in der TV-Show als geisteskrank bezeichnet. Der Gelehrte hat ihm gesagt, du brauchst medizinische Versorgung, du bist geisteskrank, du bist verwirrt, weil Mohammed Hisham sich angemaßt hatte, zu sagen, dass es auch noch andere Lebensmodelle außer dem Islam gibt. Was danach passierte, war eigentlich noch viel schrecklicher. Er wurde aus dem Studio geworfen von dem Moderator und von da ab verschwand Mohammed in den Untergrund, weil Leute nach seinem Leben trachteten. Und er hat es glücklicherweise durch Hilfe Dritter nach Deutschland geschafft und ich bin super dankbar, weil ich hatte ihn zu einer Zeit gesehen, wo ich mich an mich selber erinnert habe, als ich noch ein praktizierender Muslim war. Und damals, vor 10 Jahren, hätte ich gesagt, du Halunke, du. Ja, wagst du es, diese wunderbare und tolle Religion in Frage zu stellen? Ich bin dankbar, dass ich miterleben durfte, dass er sicher nach Deutschland flüchten konnte und dass er heute unser Gast ist. Deswegen würde ich alle noch mal bitten, ihn herzlich zu begrüßen, weil der Mann wäre bald tot gewesen. Dann möchte ich etwas zu meinem Kollegen neben mir sagen, Harris Sultan. Er ist ein australischer Ex-Muslim-Aktivist, hat ein großartiges Buch geschrieben. Er ist super aktiv in seiner Gemeinschaft. Er ist von der pakistanischen Regierung offiziell zensiert worden. Das heißt, es gab eine offizielle Anfrage der pakistanischen Regierung an die sozialen Medien wie Twitter und Facebook, seine Beiträge und seine Blogs für Pakistan schließen zu lassen. Deshalb bin ich auch dankbar, denn ich weiß, wenn Harris Sultan nach Pakistan zurückgehen würde für einen Besuch, er von dort nicht mehr lebend wegkommen würde. Deswegen würde ich noch einmal bitten, auch für meinen Kollegen Harris Sultan zu verlieren. Dann haben wir neben mir Armin Navabi. Er ist ein Ex-Muslim, gibt sich selbst als Atheist aus und hat diese riesige, unglaublich weltumspannende Plattform Atheist Republic gegründet. Er hat Millionen von Followern und auf der ganzen Welt hat man es ihm nachgetan. Also man kann seine Plattform von Mexiko bis nach Australien finden. Er ist also ein super Aktivist und hat tausende Menschen tatsächlich befreit, die sich offen auf seiner Plattform bekannt haben, die Religion, den Islam zu verlassen. Und deswegen verdient er besonders meinen Respekt, weil er hat viele, viele tausend Menschen geläutert. Dann komme ich mal zu Mimsi. Mimsi ist ägyptischen Ursprungs. Ihr Vater, Hassan Radwan, ist an der Yusuf Islam Schule in London 30 Jahre, fast knapp 30 Jahre islamischer Lehrer gewesen. Er hat faktisch Koranunterricht gegeben, Sprachunterricht in Arabisch, war ein super devoter Muslim und hat eng mit Cat Stevens alias Yusuf Islam zusammengearbeitet. Ihr Vater ist vor wenigen Jahren hat vor wenigen Jahren den Islam verlassen und hat sich entschieden, auch nicht zu schweigen. Er ist aktiv geworden, hat seinen eigenen YouTube-Channel aufgemacht und hat wissenschaftliche Beiträge gegen die islamische Dogmalehre veröffentlicht. Er hat im Zuge dieser Aktivitäten natürlich auch eine feurige Diskussion mit seiner Tochter gehalten, und Mimsi ist im Zuge dieser Diskussion ebenfalls vom Islam zurückgetreten, hat ihr Kopftuch ausgezogen, hat aufgehört zu beten, hat sich überzeugen lassen von ihrem Vater und hat schlussendlich auch ihren eigenen Blog aufgemacht und ihren eigenen YouTube-Channel und macht heute richtig lustige Videos gegen die islamische Dogmalehre, super Satire, und deswegen nochmal ein großes Dankeschön an Mimsi, herzlich willkommen. So, der nette Herr neben Mimsi ist der Ehemann von Mimsi, Vidu ist ebenfalls ein praktizierender Muslim pakistanischer Herkunft, war sehr devot in seiner Religion, war nicht so sehr politisch aktiv, aber er war ein religiöser Mensch, bis er eines Tages, genauso wie wir alle, die wir hier sitzen, Zweifel bekommen haben. Und er hat im Zuge seiner Zweifel mit seiner islamischen Weltanschauung aufgeräumt und hat sich dann schlussendlich entschieden, den Islam zu verlassen. Er hat, wie seine Frau, ebenfalls einen YouTube-Channel aufgemacht, den ich nur empfehlen kann. Ich glaube, ich habe noch nie so einen lustigen Channel gesehen. Er maskiert sich, er verkleidet sich, er singt, er tanzt und er ist einfach ein großartiger Blogger. Er macht zwar sehr viel Spaß mit rein, aber er ist auch ein großer Herausforderer in der muslimischen Community in England, besonders in London, wo sich ja eine islamische Hardcore-Szene etabliert hat, die er regelmäßig mit solchen Videos herausfordert. Und deswegen auch nochmal ein herzliches Willkommen für Vidu. Ich war 28 Jahre lang ein praktizierender Muslim, habe faktisch mit 15 Jahren angefangen, gottesdienstliche Handlungen zu vollziehen. Ich habe 15 Jahre lang eine Kurzdemonstration in Berlin mitgeleitet, mitorganisiert, einen Marsch gegen Israel, eigentlich ein Marsch gegen das Existenzrecht Israels. Ich habe 2 Moscheen mitgegründet in Berlin. Ich habe auf Hunderten Demonstrationen gesprochen. Ich wurde in ganz Deutschland eingeladen, Sprecher auf Demonstrationen zu sein oder in großen Moscheeversammlungen. Ich habe mit der iranischen Botschaft zusammengearbeitet. Ich war eine Zeit lang auch freier Journalist für die iranische Nachrichtenagentur. Ich habe in Berlin den Mykonos-Prozess moderiert oder beziehungsweise dokumentiert für das iranische Regime, wo damals ein Libanese, der ein Massaker begangen hat in einem griechischen Restaurant hier in Berlin, zu lebenslanger Haft verurteilt worden ist. Ich war ein strikter Gefolgsmann der Islamischen Republik Iran, vergötterte Imam Khomeini, vergötterte die Islamische Revolution, stand hinter allem, egal was, und war ein großer Supporter der islamischen Expansion. 2014 hat es angefangen, dass ich Zweifel an meiner Religion bekommen habe, beziehungsweise ich habe Zweifel an dem Denkverhalten anderer Muslime bekommen und habe mich aufgemacht, Untersuchungen anzustellen über meine Religion mit der Absicht, diese aggressiven Muslime zu widerlegen und zu behaupten und zu beweisen, dass es da draußen einen hervorragenden, tollen Islam gibt, der von Extremisten einfach nur missbraucht wird. Meine Untersuchungen haben mich aber zu dem Punkt gebracht, dass alles das, was ich widerlegen wollte, faktisch nicht möglich war. Ich habe also in 4 Jahren 5000 Texte übersetzt, habe 3 Webseiten aufgemacht, habe Reformgelehrte aus der ganzen Welt getroffen und wollte wirklich herausfinden, ob diese Leute den Islam falsch verstehen, und habe eigentlich herausgefunden, dass ich den Islam falsch verstanden habe. Ich habe mich dann 2017 entschieden, den Islam zu verlassen und habe das auch offen bekundet. Ich wurde angefeindet, meine Gemeinschaft hat sich von mir getrennt, ich bekam Morddrohungen, Beleidigungen. Es war wirklich eine schmutzige Schlacht, die gegen mich losbrach. Und es war eine der schlimmsten Erfahrungen, die ich gemacht habe, wenn Geschwister in der Religion, die man vorher mit Bruder oder Schwester angesprochen haben, plötzlich über Nacht sich von einem abgewendet haben. Ich bin heute ein aktiver Ex-Muslim-Blogger und ich kann zu Recht sagen, ich bin kein Reformist. Ich unterstütze auch die gesamte Reformbewegung nicht, weder hier in Deutschland noch sonst wo. Ich würde mich selber ein Exposer nennen, also ich möchte den Islam entlarven. Ich habe kein Interesse für einen Schmusekurs zwischen muslimischen Gemeinden und dem deutschen Staat. Ich sage es ganz, ganz, ganz deutlich und das ist meine feste Position und von der werde ich nicht abrücken. Ich möchte daran mitwirken, dass der Islam in Deutschland zurückgedrängt wird und nicht Raum bekommt. Ich habe kein Interesse, dass der Islam eine große Plattform bekommt. Ich möchte, dass der Islam seine Plattform verliert, dass die muslimischen Gemeinden in die Verantwortung gezogen werden für die Irrlehren, für die absurden Lehren, die sie uns verkaufen wollen. Ich möchte gleichzeitig aber auch die Reformer, die hier auf der politischen Bühne herumtanzen, und es gab eine große Diskussion im Vorfeld, soll ich diese Leute erwähnen, ja oder nein? Und ich habe natürlich mich gewehrt, darüber zu schweigen, wen ich damit meine. Und deswegen möchte ich auch die sogenannten Islamreformer, das sind die den Blümchen-Islam vertreten, oder das islamische Utopia, das nur in ihrem Kopf existiert, der Fantasie-Islam, der da draußen wirklich nicht existiert. Und das ist zum Beispiel Seyran Ateş, die eine großartige Frauenrechtlerin war, die für mich eine ganz große Achtung verdient hatte während meiner Phase, als ich weggegangen bin vom Islam. Aber als Frau Seyran Ateş angefangen hat, eine Fantasiemoschee zu bilden und plötzlich angefangen hat zu beten, habe ich verstanden, dass die Reformmuslime nicht auf unserer Seite sind und schon gar nicht auf der Seite der Ex-Muslime. Sie sind diese Nabelschnur-Muslime, die aus irgendwelchen Grund, obwohl sie die Biografie Mohammeds gelesen haben, obwohl sie die koranischen Texte kennen, obwohl sie die Gelehrtenmeinungen kennen, aus irgendwelchen Gründen immer noch an dieser Religion festhalten. Deswegen sind diese Menschen keine Hilfe für uns. Das Gleiche gilt auch für Herrn Khorshide, der einen Lehrstuhl hat und durch die Talkshow marschiert und uns alle einreden will, es gibt da draußen einen Islam, der verträglich ist, den wir alle ertragen können. Leider Gottes, meine Untersuchung, die ich die letzten 5 Jahre gemacht habe, ich muss gestehen, nichts ist unmöglicher als die Integration des Islam in Deutschland. Und die Muslime, die es schaffen, die deutsche Bundesregierung und die Organisation dazu zu bringen, sie zu fördern und die Körperschaft dieser Religion anzuerkennen, diese Leute, unsere Politiker, sie haben überhaupt nicht verstanden, welches gefährliches Potenzial wir in Zukunft, welches gefährliches Potenzial im Islam liegt, wenn wir mehr muslimische Zuwanderung bekommen, wenn die Muslime anfangen, sich in politischen Parteien zu organisieren. Ich habe eine Untersuchung, die ich jetzt seit 4 Monaten anstelle und die ich leider erst zum Ende des Jahres abschließen kann. Eine Untersuchung zur Geburt muslimischer Parteien in Europa. Und ich möchte sagen, wir haben jetzt in Europa 20 muslimische Parteien, die auf dem Weg sind. Und sie kommen aus den Moscheen, aus den Hinterhofmoscheen, sie organisieren sich und sie haben verstanden, dass es einen Moment gibt, wo sie auf diesen Zug aufspringen müssen, um eine politische Kraft in Europa zu werden. Und die Entwicklung geht dahin, dass wir in naher Zukunft schon so viele Muslime in diesem Land haben werden. Einige Studien sprechen von 17 Millionen bis 2050, was bedeuten würde, dass es etwa 1/4 aller Bürger in Deutschland wären Muslime. Die muslimischen Parteien haben das verstanden und deswegen haben sie begonnen, sich politisch zu organisieren. Und das bedeutet, wenn sie sich so attraktiv gestalten können, dass die Muslime, die zugewandert sind, sie wählen, dann werden sie auch Einfluss auf unser aller Leben haben. Und in Belgien ist das bereits geschehen. Die muslimische Partei in Belgien hat bereits jetzt schon vor einigen Monaten die Forderung ins Parlament eingereicht, dass es in Belgien getrennte Busse für Männer und für Frauen geben soll. Und das ist der Grund, warum ich weder für die Reformer stehe, noch für einen Dialog zwischen den muslimischen Gemeinden und der Bundesrepublik Deutschland. Mein Interesse besteht darin, den Islam zurückzudrängen, die politisch-islamischen Aktivitäten auf ein Minimum zu beschränken und dass wir, die Säkularen, die Humanisten, die Freidenker, die Demokraten, den Takt angeben, wie viel Islam wir in Deutschland haben wollen und vor allem, wie viel wir ertragen können. Und wir sind an einem Punkt angelangt, wir alle wissen, dass wir Millionen von Flüchtlingen bekommen haben. Und zwar von 2015 ab bis jetzt hat die Bundesregierung nahezu 1,5 Millionen Flüchtlinge ins Land gelassen. Diese Leute bringen nicht nur ein sehr gestörtes Weltbild zu uns, sondern sie bringen immense Probleme in dieses Land, die wir mit den Einwanderern der ersten und zweiten Generation nicht stemmen konnten. Wie sollen wir bitteschön Menschen aus einem Kulturkreis integrieren, die mit einem Weltbild zu uns kommen, das diametral zu unserem Weltbild steht? Deshalb wünsche ich mir in der Zukunft, dass diese Ex-Muslim-Konferenz zu einer Bürgerprotestbewegung wird, wo wir anfangen werden, so viel Druck auszuüben, dass letztendlich große Debatten in Deutschland stattfinden, wie viel Islam verträgt dieses Land und ob wir überhaupt den Islam hier integrieren wollen. Meine Position als Ex-Muslim ist klar. Wir brauchen keine Islamreformer, weil uns der Islam nichts angeht. Wir brauchen den Islam hier nicht. Er ist nicht ein Teil unserer kulturellen Identität, nicht ein Teil der deutschen Geschichte. Und wir haben gesehen, was für Probleme wir mit dieser Religion bekommen haben. Wir haben fast 9000 Anschläge auf der ganzen Welt gehabt, kleine und große, in einem Jahr. Es gab eine immense Anzahl von Attacken gegen Nichtmuslime in der westlichen Welt. Und wir müssen lernen, wir müssen aus diesen Problemen lernen, die wir hier gesehen haben. Wir müssen lernen, dass diese Anzahl von Terrorattacken, die überall auf der Welt stattgefunden haben, und die von einer einzigen Weltanschauung ausgehen, dass wir so etwas nicht integrieren müssen. Wir brauchen so etwas nicht hier. Was wir brauchen, ist die Entfernung des Islam aus unserer Gesellschaft. Und wir können natürlich die Muslime nicht isolieren, wir können sie auch nicht diskriminieren. Aber wir können den Takt angeben, wie viel Islam wir in der Öffentlichkeit sehen wollen. Wir können den Takt angeben. Wir streiten uns mit unseren eigenen Werten, dass wir einen säkularen Freiraum haben, den wir behalten können. Und nicht, dass Muslime anfangen, wie im Fall von Asia Bibi, einer pakistanischen Christin, die 10 Jahre in einem pakistanischen Gefängnis gesessen hat, die sich einfach mit ihren Dorfkolleginnen gestritten hat, die sie dann auf eine gemeine Art und Weise der Polizei gemeldet haben und gesagt haben, sie hätte als Christin den Koran beleidigt. Und dann ist die arme Frau ins Gefängnis gekommen für Blasphemie, musste dort 10 Jahre im Gefängnis sitzen, auf ihre Todesstrafe warten. Unter großem Protest konnte diese Frau raus aus Pakistan. Und dann begann etwas, was ich als ein Szenario beschreibe, das ich die Peinlichkeit der westlichen Regierung nenne. Niemand wollte Asia Bibi aufnehmen. Die englische Regierung hat offiziell gesagt, in einem offiziellen Statement, dass wenn wir Asia Bibi aufnehmen, befürchten wir Unruhen durch die Religion des Friedens in England. Und Asia Bibi wurde abgelehnt. Eine Frau, die eine Christin ist, die sich in das Wertebild von England leicht einfügen konnte. Aber stattdessen öffnet England die Tür für Muslime, lässt eine Expansion des Islam in England zu. Und da hat die englische Regierung offenbar überhaupt keine Probleme, Extremisten ins Land zu lassen. Und natürlich auch die Linke, die Labour Party, beteuert, dass es wunderbar und exzellent mit den Muslimen in England funktioniert und dass wir einfach nur alle islamophob sind. Wir wollen so etwas nicht, wir wollen das nicht. Wir wollen nicht, dass uns eine Minderheit, eine aggressive ideologische Minderheit diktiert, wen wir in Sicherheit bringen wollen und wen nicht. Und wenn das in solch einem kleinen Rahmen geschieht, dann sage ich Ihnen, wenn wir erst einmal eine große Anzahl von Muslimen haben, dann werden die Muslime unseren Alltag bestimmen. Nicht überall, aber wir werden es zu spüren bekommen. Frauen in Deutschland fangen an, mit Pfefferspray herumzulaufen. Sie mögen auch nicht mehr abends so gerne rausgehen. Es gibt ein Unmutsgefühl. Wir haben sehr viele deutsche Frauen, die gesagt haben, sie wurden von muslimischen Flüchtlingen belästigt und beleidigt. Und das ist eine Situation, die wir nicht mehr akzeptieren können. Und wir müssen Tacheles reden. Wir müssen aufhören, dass alles unter dem Deckmantel ist Kritik am Islam, ist Fremdfeindlichkeit, Xenophobie oder Islamophobie. Wir müssen endlich Tacheles reden und Klartext reden, dass wir ein Problem mit dieser Ideologie haben. Wir haben kein Problem mit irgendjemand anderem.
Danke, Kian, für diese klaren Worte. Jetzt geht es ein bisschen mehr in die Details. Wir beginnen jetzt mit Vidovic aus London. Er ist ein YouTuber.
So, I make comedy videos on YouTube. My YouTube channel is Vidovic. So, I stand for free speech, for free expression. And just to give you a brief background about myself so you understand where I'm coming from. I was born in Pakistan. I came to the UK when I was 1. So virtually my whole life I've lived in the UK. My parents raised me as a mainstream Muslim. I wasn't very extreme, I wasn't very liberal. I prayed, I fasted, no pork, no girlfriends, that kind of stuff. And I also went to a Muslim school from the ages of 13 to 16. So before that I was in a normal state school. My parents said, you're not working hard enough, you need to up your game, you need to go to a Muslim boys' school, which was also Cat Stevens' Muslim boys' school, that's Yusuf Islam. During my story, there are a couple of watershed moments. Some moments that really changed the way I thought about myself, about Islam and the world, and I will let you know where they are. The first watershed moment, you could say, was 9/11 and 7/7. Before 9/11, I was just Pakistani. Yes, I was Muslim, but my main source of identity was that I was a Pakistani boy. I had more in common with Indian Hindus, Indian Sikhs, Bangladeshis. We play cricket, we have similar language, we watch Bollywood movies, we eat curry, that kind of thing. After 9/11, I was only around 11 years old, so I didn't really understand the full magnitude of what happened. But after 9/11, 7/7, I wasn't just Pakistani British, I was a Muslim British. I had now more in common with Arabs, with Somalians, people that I didn't really know about. I didn't speak their language, I didn't, watch their movies, but because our identity had changed. We went from religiously Muslim to politically Muslim. So now Islam was our main focus of identity. So now I was more aligned. My brethren were Somalians or Moroccans or Egyptians, people that I had no knowledge of before. One other important moment was when I was in a Muslim school, I was introduced to drama, to acting. And I was very lucky that I had a teacher who was actually a convert to Islam. He was English. And there's this famous play called The Demise of Dr. Faustus, or Dr. Faustus. And he changed this to The Demise of Imam Faustus. So just, a few variations. It was funny, it was lighthearted, it was pretty much the same story as before, but with an Islamic touch. I was the sort of biggest, most hairiest, you could say, guy in the school. I played Satan, which is funny now. I played Jennifer Lopez and Vanity. So 2 female roles and 1 male role. But what I discovered was that I enjoyed expressing myself on stage through humor, through acting, and actually some teachers in the Muslim school said that acting is a bad idea. You shouldn't play a girl, you're a man, you should know that you're a man, all this kind of stuff. But my parents were very supportive and my teacher believed in me, so I did very well in that play and I was amazing as Jennifer Lopez. Thank you. Then I went to university, and in university I would say I was exposed to many different religious, political ideas, to different people from different backgrounds, and here I did a lot of research into Islam. I was also active in the Islamic Society in the university. I was actually invited to speak at a local college to defend Islam against atheism, and I actually did very well as well. So I was a very good Muslim. But when I was doing my research into Islam, this is where I came across certain doubts. I was someone who, although I was raised Muslim, I was raised to appreciate science, that the world, we understand things through science. And there are many Muslims who believe that science and Islam are, basically saying the same things in different ways, that they are synced. So I was one of those Muslims. I really valued rationality in science. But there are obviously many problems with Islam when it comes to science, whether it's miracles, whether it's the creation of the universe, whether it's evolution. And my Muslim friends were saying, why are you, start worrying about science? And I was like, why can't I be Muslim and believe in evolution? Why can't I be Muslim and reconcile my faith with science? So the only way I could do this was to look at the Quranic verses in a metaphorical way, right? Not literally, but metaphorically. So that was my way of getting around it. And by the way, this is a minority opinion within Islam. The vast majority of Muslims do not subscribe to this type of thinking. I looked at different speakers, Salafi, Sufi, Wahhabi, Reformist, people like Zakir Naik, Hamza Yusuf, Tariq Ramadan. I tried to look at every Muslim speaker to try and get a well-rounded opinion of Islam. Then another watershed moment, in 2015, Charlie Hebdo. I was too young, or maybe not that aware about the Danish cartoons, what happened there. I didn't really understand fully what happened. Someone drew a cartoon, some Muslim was angry, they killed him. I didn't really understand. But I remember very vividly Charlie Hebdo. Now I was not a fan of Charlie Hebdo, I didn't look at their magazines or anything. And when I realized what happened, obviously I was disgusted that someone could feel it's right to kill someone because they drew a cartoon. And a lot of the Muslims that were around me, they were moderate, educated, kind of westernized Muslims, like your average Muslim. And they were all saying, yeah, it's wrong to kill people, but they shouldn't have done it. But, what did they expect? And I was like, well, I expect they act like human beings and respect the law. That's what I expect. Why are we having a lower standard for Muslims and a higher standard for everyone else? And I was a Muslim at the time. And I said, my faith is stronger than your cartoon. Why should my faith in God, if I believe in God and Muhammad, the perfect creator, the book and everything, you can draw anything on the piece of paper. Why should I have to kill you if I don't like what you have to draw? And this was a moment where I could no longer justify any sort of blasphemy law. I thought, this is a disgusting thing. And the fact that some Muslims are like, yeah, it's wrong, but you know, I was like, no, there is no R-E. This is wrong, and we should not apologize for terrorists and murders. Sorry. Then I went some time to work abroad with some Muslim colleagues of mine. And bearing in mind, I gradually stopped believing in sort of these miracles in Islam. I became a Quranist, which means I didn't really care about Hadith anymore because I thought that they were very problematic. Most of the violent scriptures are from the Hadith. There are some violent scriptures in the Quran, but a lot of them are in the Hadith. So I stopped believing in that. I stopped believing in blasphemy law. I became more rational. Sorry, for those of you who do not know Hadith, these are the sayings of the Prophet. These are not part of the divine text, but these are collected sayings. Some are more strong, some are more valid, some are more authentic than others. And I did that because I wanted to reduce the amount of mental gymnastics I would have to do to justify my religion, basically. But when I was discussing or having these talks with Muslims abroad, it gives you time to think, you know, when you're away from home. But basically what happened was Muslims made me an atheist. I used to watch a lot of Dawkins, a lot of Christopher Hitchens, and a lot of Sam Harris. They could not make me atheist because I was very defensive when someone else was telling me, oh, your religion says this. But when I got talking to Muslims who were saying the same thing, and I was like, really? Do we believe in this? Are you going to justify this? Then we had a 2-hour conversation. At the end of the conversation, they said, you know what, Waleed? You think like Richard Dawkins, you think like an atheist. And for me, that was an insult. I was like, how could you compare me, a Muslim who believes in God, to Richard Dawkins? That's the biggest insult I could find. But what they did to me was they showed me a mirror. Because this is who you are. This is what you're saying, this is what you believe. And I realized, actually, you know what? Gradually over the years, my Islamic beliefs have gone one by one to the wayside. There's nothing left that I can say that I'm Muslim. I believe in science, I don't believe in blasphemy law, I don't believe in miracles, I believe in evolution. So, what's left? And it was true. So I want to thank those Muslims. Through their dawah and through their work, they made me an atheist. Then I came back to the UK, and I graduated. I was in between jobs. I didn't have anything stable at the moment, and I was bored. And I think boredom is the best engine for creativity. So I had to find a way to entertain myself, and this is where I created the YouTube channel, which is Video Vids. I was bored, and going back to the time where I was doing drama, you know, obviously when you're young, you want to do drama, I want to be an actor, mummy, daddy, I want to be an actor. No, you have to do studies, all that kind of stuff. So I was like, okay, fine. But now I had some spare time to do acting, to do some creativity. And this is where I started making videos on YouTube about satire and Islam. I was a big comedy fan, and the only Muslim comedy that was out there was Muslims saying, we are victims, we're oppressed, haha. But there was no, how come we believe in a flying horse? How come we've got so many silly things in our culture and religion? Why do we believe in this? There was nothing that was self-critical. So my comedy was criticizing Islam using satire. I made a few videos, some of them went viral. I did not plan on this, doing this forever, but when I saw the response, I was like, you know what, maybe there is something here. How did the Muslims react? A lot of Muslims were actually, well done. We like your comedy. We like the fact that you are holding these sheikhs and these imams accountable. Yes, some Muslims are like, how dare you, da 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 da. But many Muslims were supportive of my comedy, even when they found out I was an ex-Muslim. And I think there is a huge market for satire, for comedy, for arts, for music within the Muslim world. But there is a very vocal minority that wants to shut people down. They are shutting them down in Muslim countries. I would invite you to not allow them to shut them down in Europe, please. This is one of the places that we need Muslims and ex-Muslims to flourish, to adopt and protect free speech. I want Muslims to lead us on free speech. I don't want them to hit them over the head with free speech. I want to show Muslims free speech is amazing. Muslims can be better Muslims in Europe than in the Muslim world. And if you don't believe me, just look at religious minorities in Muslim countries. If you are born the wrong type of Muslim, you can be persecuted and have less rights. So, I really want to stress the importance of the comedy and the arts in the conversation. There is a room for debate and rebuttal and, 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there, going back and forth. Those things are very important. But one of the most important things is art, is music, is comedy, because these things transcend any culture. These things transcend any language. And this has been my approach. I want Muslims to have fun with their religion. Right? I want them to be critical using comedy. Islam is a gold mine for a comedian, just like Christianity is. And the same heritage that I have from a European point of view, of Christians or Westerners criticizing Christianity. You look at people like George Carlin or Ricky Gervais and Russell Brand. These are comedians that are self-critical of themselves, of their own culture, of their own civilization, and they are accepted. Why can't Muslims have the same, or ex-Muslims have the same? I want to be self-critical out of love, not out of hate. We are unfortunately losing a battle on free speech. The unholy marriage of the far left and certain Islamists have really silenced people who believe in free speech. And we need to challenge them. We need to show them that free speech is the way forward. Free speech is the foundation of all the other freedoms we have in this country or any other countries. And I want Muslims to have free speech. I want them to say what they want to say, even if it's crazy. As long as it's not inciting violence, I want them to say what they have to say so we can have a discussion. And I just want to finish on this point, because I've been going on for a long time. But there are certain people who, out of even good intention, say, you know what, we shouldn't say things that are hateful, things that are too critical, because people can get offended. Right? If we want to start the conversation by saying we can't say things that are offensive, then we won't say anything at all. Because the people that will be most affected by cutting down on things that are offensive are religious people themselves. Have you read their books? If you want to start with offensive things about gays and apostates and burning in hell, these are very offensive things. If you want to ban offensive things, let's start with the Bible, let's start with the Quran. And very quickly they'll realize, oh, actually, you know what, maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe we should allow people to express themselves as long as they are not inciting to violence. And can I just say, we should not be giving into demands of people who take themselves so seriously they cannot allow any mocking of their ideas or of themselves. These are not the people that we should be giving up our rights to. So I would invite everyone here, please speak freely on Islam or any other religion or any other political ideology. Free speech is for everyone, and we should not be curtailing it, but protecting it and spreading it to other people. Thank you.
Thank you so much for remembering us who we are and where the values Europe was founded on. Thank you. Mohammed, you are the next one to speak to us, and welcome to a country which hopefully lets you speak freely.
First, I would like to thank the organizers for giving us this platform. Last year, I appeared on Egyptian TV declaring that I left Islam. Unfortunately, I have been met on air with aggression, hostility, and humiliation. Later, I got physically assaulted and received many prison and death threats. It was a true manifestation of religious fascism. my freedom and personal safety became in danger. The situation was so disturbing, it even caught the attention of international newspapers and agencies, such as Times of Israel, Independent UK, Russia Today, and the Deutsche. This is my story with Islam that led me up to this moment. I have grown up in a house where Islam is an integral part of almost every aspect of life. Unlike many Egyptian families, mine made sure that I'm properly introduced to Islam since a young age. When I was 6, I used to answer the calls for prayer in the mosque multiple times a day. And I used to go to a school specialized at teaching Quran. As you may know, religion takes advantage of children's lacks of proper critical thinking skills and abuse them through indoctrination and introducing them to irrational and abusive worldview. Learning about Islam in this young age was a traumatic experience for me. As a child, I used to have frequent nightmares about Judgment Day and disturbing fear from theological entities such as the devil. At the age of 8, I started to doubt everything I've learned, and I actually became agnostic. However, I kept my lack of belief to myself in fear of parental punishment. So I continued carrying on my Islamic routine as usual, until one day the Imam at Friday prayers in the mosque wanted to play a probabilistic game on us. He said that Allah will answer your prayers if you pray right before dawn. It seemed like a cool experiment for an 8-year-old. I wake up right before dawn and said, Allah, if you are real, please make my math teacher, Jihan, be absent tomorrow because I didn't finish her homework. I went to school the next day to find that the teacher is absent. Later I discovered that she resigned. And actually my class spent 2 weeks without a math teacher. As you may have guessed, I unfortunately fell a victim to logical fallacies and false premise, and I became a Muslim again. I spent most of my teens a strict Muslim, which caused me much pain considering that my sexual orientation in Islam is viewed as perversion. And like many Muslim teens, I used to fantasize about jihad and dying in the name of Allah. Until I learned English and got exposed to Western philosophy and science, this led me to ditch Islam. It became obvious to me that the Quran made many mistakes while attempting to explain the natural world and that it essentially is a hate speech book. I realized that Muhammad, the founder of Islam and its most prominent figure, led a very inhuman and disturbing life. From enslaving innocent women for sex, to murdering people and stealing the land and wealth. Also philosophical topics such as the problem of evil determinism rendered the Abrahamic God to me as a mere logical fallacy. After leaving Islam, I felt peace toward myself and the world, but I started to grow apart from my community and society. Religious ideologies and its manifestation touches and mutilate everything in me now. It became very hard for me to integrate or make friends, given my disgust to my community's inhuman and Islamic-inspired way of life and mindset. However, I kept my lack of belief to myself and lived many years in isolation. But I carried on my Islamic routine as usual for appearances. Life in Islamic countries is easier this way. Well, generally this wasn't a pleasant period in my life. But later I made ex-atheist friends in real life thanks to Atheist Republic online groups. I really liked them and I felt that we should be the future and the present of Egypt, not the Islamists or the conservative Egyptians. Briefly after meeting my Egyptian atheist friends, an advertisement appeared in a closed Facebook group saying that a TV show in Cairo is looking for atheist participants to be interviewed. 95% of the comments were discouraging and negative, given that the potential consequences that await who will ever do this. It's a social and professional suicide, and consequences such as travel ban, jail, false arrest, physical assault are all expected outcomes. But sacrifices have to be made. Freedom freedom don't come for free. I went to the show and I suffered for it. The footage of the interview was so disturbing it went viral overnight. Later my family saw me on TV and they had a very ugly response. A relative police officer physically assaulted me. They locked me up, took my money, threatened me with prison for breaking blasphemy law. Social media had all the evidence needed to put me on trial or behind bar, and given the situation of human rights in Egypt, it was not wise to challenge this. There are about 4 out of 100 million Egyptian citizens who got publicly known to be atheists while they are on Egyptian soils. Sharif Gaber, and he is currently hiding from Egyptian authorities, and if he got caught, it's expected that he spent a long time in jail. Me, the one who got away, and 2 other activists who are banned from traveling and essentially living under national security control. After the show, I went off social media and declared that I'm back to Islam. And I lived under my family's control until I escaped them and escaped the country. I managed to be here in safety and freedom thanks to many gracious humanists who offered all sorts of help. Special thanks to Troy Garno, my closest friend, who spent a lot of time, effort and money getting me out of this hardship. Thanks to Sam Harris, Mariam Namazi, Armin Navabi, the International Humanist and Ethical Union and Secular Rescue, and many other gracious humanists who I will always be grateful and indebted to. I went to Germany for protection, but it didn't take me long to realize that my situation there is not as safe as I expected. Currently, in a way, I'm forced to live in a house surrounded by people coming from Islamic country with the same mindset that leads to our persecution in MENA. At the first camp, I expressed myself naturally when residents asked me about my reasons for seeking protection in Germany, and I experienced verbal and physical harassment as a consequence. Luckily, I got transferred after a few days, but I learned my lesson, and now I pretend in front of my house and schoolmates to be a Muslim person, and I hide my sexual orientation to stay out of trouble. I'm glad that this is just a temporary situation, and I really hope that the German government managed to come up with even more effective ways to integrate them and neutralize these threats to human rights. Another thing that I find a little scary and very peculiar is that the German law still grants religion rights against some types of criticism. There are people in Germany who got in legal troubles for ridiculing or insulting religion. Unlike people, ideologies should not have rights. It's injustice to us atheists to be ridiculed and insulted in many religious books, and it would be illegal for us to publicly disrespect these books or refute them via mockery. This seems to me as a lingering ruins of religious fascism, and I hope it disappears in the future. However, the interaction between blasphemy laws, if they persisted, and the rise of Muslim population in the West might make for interesting times. Regarding my plans to the future, I'm going to start an Arabic show to support Egyptian LGBT, since that nobody's actually doing this. And I'm going to learn German and hopefully find nice work in IT sector, since that I'm an electrical engineer. But my future is not so foreseeable, since that my asylum request got denied. They basically concluded that Egypt, a country with Sharia law, is safe for a public gay ex-Muslim. The decision is simply detached from the reality of my part of the world. They disregarded my experience, the Egyptian law, and the situation of human rights in my country. But currently the decision is being challenged in court. Wish me luck and safety. Thank you for listening.
It's really sad that you still don't feel safe in Germany. I'm very sorry for that. I would like to welcome people like you. Thank you for your open words. And now it's Mimsi Witz who will talk to us. Thank you.
Hello everybody. So yeah, I kind of just want to give a background on to my story first of all. So I was born in a fairly strict Muslim household. My dad was actually the leader, or I don't know, it's not necessarily an imam, but he was kind of a very big person in the mosque, basically the central London mosque. So he would bring people to Islam and teach them about Islam. And my mum as well, so she was part of the kind of women's society. So we were very much raised in a Muslim bubble within London. I didn't actually meet non-Muslims. I mean, that's how embedded I was. My school was a Muslim school, you know, my friends were Muslim, my community was Muslim, so even though I was in London, it was like I was in a little Muslim bubble, as I call it. And, you know, my dad, I think, was mentioned, I think so, that he later on did leave Islam. And, you know, we were such a big kind of tight-knit community that once he left, he basically got kicked out of our lives. You know, I didn't see him for a couple of years. We were told that he had a mental illness. You know, he was suffering from depression, and that's why he left. And it's better to not kind of communicate too much with someone that's left Islam, basically. So I actually became more religious when that happened, and I really kind of went into religion, and I thought, you know, I'll help him eventually, but also it's better for me to be a kind of good Muslim and all that sort of stuff. So I wore the hijab and all that sort of stuff. So what I actually wanted to talk about today, though, was just a focus on women's issues, because I could go into so many things within Islam that I eventually started to have problems with as I learnt more. But the women's issues for me, and obviously being the only woman on the panel, I feel like it's my duty. But for me, that was something that really kind of stuck out. Thank you. So as I mentioned, I went to a Muslim school, and at the age of 5, we wore the headscarf, which is the hijab. And we were told, you know, at a very young age that, you know, boys and girls have to be separated. You know, you have to have kind of a limit, you know. A girl is too beautiful. I remember one teacher telling me it's like a pearl in an oyster, you know, you have to protect the beauty, and so you have to cover totally, and not just cover, but be in a separate room. You know, you just can't even mix with men. So you're kind of indoctrinated with this, oh okay, so boys are scary, stay away, when you're a small Muslim girl. You know, there were lots of kind of threats as well, you know, that obviously you'll be punished and that sort of thing. So when I grew up, as I said, I started to become more religious, and my reasoning, my understanding of even hijab evolved, and you know, I started to understand it as it's a feminist movement as well. You know, it's me kind of telling everyone that I'm not just about my beauty, but I'm about the brains, you know. And I had my own way of understanding why I was wearing the hijab, and I became, as I said, you know, I definitely became someone that's very strong in my religion. I would go to university and kind of talk about it in this sort of platform, but I would be the Muslim kind of talking about why it's so great. Obviously, you know, looking deeper into it, what the hijab actually does is it completely sexualizes the girls. You know, you grow up with this mentality of you are a sexual object. I mean, that's basically what it is. You know, it doesn't occur to you when you're entrenched with it from such a young age, but you know, when I was at university, it really started to occur to me the difference in how, you know, the non-Muslims treated women, and how people that weren't brought up the way I was brought up treated women and looked at women. And I remember even just going on holiday, and I went to a beach, and I thought, well, all these girls are in bikinis. Obviously I was completely covered, which is awful, don't try it. And yeah, so I kind of thought in that moment, like, nothing's happening. You know, these guys are not going crazy over these girls. It's not chaos, you know, because these women are showing their bodies. And that was the first time I kind of thought, that's a bit odd, because if I go to a Muslim country, even in hijab, I will get terrorized by men. I will be followed by men. It's dangerous for a woman to go out in a Muslim country. So that started to occur to me, why is it that the hijab isn't working? If the hijab is for protection and the hijab is, you know, to make sure everything's great and we've got a nice society, it's not working. Because of course those little boys are also brought up thinking, you know, don't look at the women are so sexual, don't look at them, they're too beautiful for you. And then, you know, it's also quite horrible to men in general as well, because you're just assuming they're animals and they can't contain themselves. So that was the kind of first thing that I started to realise about the way women are viewed in Islam. And, you know, that this emphasis on a woman being pure as well. So she's covered because she can't be seen by a man, because she can't, you know, it would be completely outrageous if she were touched by a man or, you know, did anything, you know, with a man. That would be completely outrageous and she would lose her purity. And so this emphasis on purity and a virgin girl, you know, I think the Prophet Muhammad had said it's better for you to marry a virgin. And you know, I'm sure everyone knows as well that if you die a martyr, you get 72 virgins. So there's so much of this emphasis on, as I said, purity. So what that does in the Muslim community is it creates this, well, this is what's pure, you're completely covered, you don't talk to any boys, you stay at home, you don't interact with anyone really. But then there are, you know, this shame culture that then comes with that, if you do interact. Or even if you wear a hijab, but you're wearing it slightly tight, or you're showing a bit more wrist than you should. You know, it creates this culture of guilt as a woman that you feel, you know, like, I'm not good enough as a woman, you know, I should be hiding, and, you know, and shame. And then this leads on to how, you know, people say, well, the hijab is a freedom of choice. Well, it's not exactly, is it? If you've got this amount of pressure that if you don't wear it, you're impure and you're basically a whore, is what the alternative is that's how you're made to feel. And, you know, these women that kind of say that, I don't know, I mean, I was one that said that, you know, I was one that said, yeah, it's my choice. But I totally understand that at this point that it is just this societal pressure and this honour that you have to kind of uphold. And this kind of shame culture actually leads to so much more issues. Of course, there are so many cases that are so undercover, you know, you won't hear about them necessarily, but the abuse that happens to women, the abuse that happens to women because they're not wearing the hijab, you know, it is forced within this pressure to wear it, within the community, within the family, because if you don't wear it, you're impure and you're an embarrassment to the family. And that's very, very strong within our communities. You know, I used to go out with girls that would wear the hijab, and then once they get out the door, then take it off and put their jeans on and put their t-shirt on. That's so common in our community, you know. So for when people tell me like, oh, it's a choice in the West, you know, they're free to do what they want. I lived in London and that's not the case at all. I mean, even if it was the case within these communities, they weren't forced or there wasn't pressure, if you are a Muslim girl, you know, you're told if you don't wear the hijab, you'll burn for eternity. In fact, I remember specifically being 6 years old and being told that every strand of hair that you show, you'll be hung in heaven, in hell, that wouldn't be too bad, no, in hell, by every strand. So it's, you know, you're tormented with that from a very, very young age. So coming back to also what I used to say when I was a Muslim, and I used to say, well, you know, it's the hijab is there so you can focus on my mind and, you know, how intellectual I am, and rather than looking at my beauty, I remember kind of thinking that must be why we're doing this. And then I looked deeper into Islam and the status of women. I mean, the Prophet actually said this, I'm going to quote it: women are intellectually deficient. So women are deficient intellectually and actually religiously, is what he said as well. You know, there's no kind of way to turn that around. You know, in Islam, women are believed to be secondary to men. You know, men are overarching, and there's no way to spin that. You know, I know people try to, and I try to, for God's sake, I really try to. There's no way you can. I mean, if you go through the Islamic law, you know, the testimony of, so if you were to be in court, the testimony of a woman is half that of a man's. So, and the Prophet explained that, you know, if you have a man's testimony, that's fine. If you have a woman's, you've got to have 2 women in case the other woman forgets. So, yeah, so there's a complete difference in how all of the kind of, how women are treated. Same in divorce. I mean, I could actually just go on for ages, I won't though, but in divorce, a man can divorce just by saying, I divorce you, pretty much, to his wife, whereas a woman would need to go to a man higher up, a religious leader, to make sure it's okay to get divorced. And then inheritance, I mean, as I said, I could go on. There's so many things where women are not equals to men. And the Quran also addresses men throughout. A lot of people kind of don't even notice that. I don't think I noticed that as a Muslim, but throughout the Quran, it's kind of addressing men, at least initially. But it, you know, it even says at one point, you know, tell your women to kind of cover them, the believing women to cover themselves. So it's like giving this power to the men, like you tell them to do that. It's not even directly for us. So the belittling of women, I mean, it goes further to the verse that's about beating your wife. You know, there are clear instructions in the Quran that if your wife is disobedient, then first of all stop talking to her, and if that doesn't work, then don't share a bed with her, and if that doesn't work, then you can hit her. So, you know, there's, as I said, very clear instructions of how men deal with women, because women are secondary to men. Men are in charge, and there's so many more examples, as I said, that I can give of that. And I just think it's so important that these things are discussed, because they're at the core of our Muslim communities, whether they're in the West or not. And, you know, we have trouble speaking about it because otherwise we're Islamophobes. You know, if it was in a company or if it was anywhere else where we were saying actually they're really unequal to women, you know, this is what they do, they only pay them whatever, or they only do this, you know, women, everyone would be up in arms about how this is so disgustingly unequal. But when it comes to kind of Muslim communities, we have to stay quiet, apparently, because then we're insulting them, which is so frustrating, because it's, you know, it's not that we're kind of out there just bashing people, or it's not even that I hate Muslims. My family, most of them are still Muslims. You know, it's the ideology. It's this idea that is the problem, and it's creating so many issues. I mean, you know, people are dying over issues like this. There are honor killings all over the world. I mean, as I said to you, most of these things will not be kind of in newspapers or all over the place, but abuse is happening every single day, like behind closed doors, because of this ideology. So particularly for women, I think this is something that we all need to just scream about and have everywhere, and allow people the room to speak their mind and give them the freedom to speak about this, because at the moment they don't have it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mindy, for fighting the women's case. There's really a lot of violence in both words, but we have to stop the violence, cultural violence against women in any kind. Lassen Sie uns jetzt einmal kurz innehalten, damit auch unser Übersetzer einmal tief Luft holen kann. Und wenn Sie Ihre Fragen stellen wollen, dann zögern Sie jetzt nicht. Sprechen Sie mit unseren großartigen Referenten. Wer hat eine persönliche Frage? Möchte etwas nachhaken?
Welcome, Lindsay. I have a very simple question to all of you. How do you practically leave Islam? What did you do?
Quite interesting point.
More questions.
Someone else who would like to give them a question and they could answer them all together? Yeah?
Yes, I also have a question for all of you. Thank you at first for all the stories you shared with us so far. Very moving. And I really wonder, why have you recognized the weakness of Islam ideology and why don't others do so? That's my question. What's the point? What makes the difference?
Thank you.
My name is Astrid and I'm a German fighter for women rights. And I've got a question for you, Mimsi, because I want to hear what's about your relationship, your marriage. And you told that a lot of people of your family are Muslims. And how do you... my English is not so good. What's about the exception about your marriage and your relationship now? Can you live free like I suppose? Yes? Okay.
Thank you. Christian? Okay. Christian? Okay.
So we married as Muslims. So we were all fine. Yeah, we were fine. We actually met. If you didn't notice, we went to the same school back at Stevens. So we met at school. Yeah, and then we got married, and then we kind of took a journey of learning more about Islam. And became more religious and actually wanted to be kind of, like leaders of helping people and talking about Islam, and then it just went the opposite way. And then we both kind of decided, this is not for us. And the family, a lot of my family have cut me off, so in the same way they cut my dad off, my side of the family have pretty much, most of them have cut me off, if not kept me at a distance. And yeah, that's pretty much. Does that answer your question?
There's other questions.
Okay.
How do you leave Islam?
Oh, how do you leave Islam? Am I going to answer them all?
I can try.
Okay. Okay. Wait, hold on. I just want to say one thing. There was one question about why doesn't anyone else kind of do the same thing that we do? Now, ex-Muslims is an iceberg, a huge iceberg, okay? That there's so many closeted ex-Muslims. The reason why you don't see them or they're not talking out is because we get so much abuse. I mean, I have maybe 10 death threats a day in my inbox. I've had people tell me how they're going to abuse me, rape me, kill me, if they just want to find me, that's all they want to do. So it's not that easy kind of being, an outwardly ex-Muslim. Especially if you're in a Muslim country. I mean, you will be likely killed or abused. So that's the main reason why. But a lot of the reason as well is I've found that my family particularly, you're not supposed to ask too many questions as well. There is this kind of fear of asking too many questions, and that can lead you to a kind of, the bad path. So they first instill that in you. But then, as I said, there are so many ex-Muslims that we don't know about. Do you want to answer this question?
Yeah, sure. Okay, how do you leave Islam? I mean, it's very simple. You just stop believing. There's nothing magical about it. As soon as you stop believing in God, as soon as you stop believing in the Quran as being direct word of God, as soon as you stop believing in Muhammad being the prophet of God, it's proof you're not a Muslim anymore. There's nothing. There's no rituals. There's no virgin sacrifices or anything like that here. Regarding why others don't recognize the problems with Islam. My answer might sound insulting. I'm not trying to be insulting. This is what I really think is the truth. And the truth is that most people are not very smart. And that's not true about people everywhere, not just specific countries, right? And I wrote a book called Why There's No God, to simplify all the answers to why some people stop believing in God as much as possible. But you can't simplify it enough for most people. And what we're trying to experiment with now is to see, what I've realized is that even though most people are not intelligent, most people are kind. Most people have a sense of sympathy. I argued with this Christian woman for hours because she was saying she believes in God because it says so in the Bible, and I asked her why she thinks the Bible is true, and she said because it comes from God. And I tried everything to show her why that is circular, examples, and it just didn't work. But when I argued with her, listen, maybe you're right, and I'm wrong. And I just don't get it. You get it, and I just don't get it. Maybe there's something wrong with the way I think. Do you think it's fair for me to be burning in hell forever because I got the answer wrong? And that, she immediately got why that's unfair. I didn't have to explain that. Because most people have a sense of fairness. They understand, you can recognize when something is unfair. So maybe one thing with the atheist community is that maybe we do need intellectual responses to logical fallacies, but if we just focus on that only, we're missing most of the planet, and we can't ignore most of the planet. I think focusing on kindness and sympathy could be a method that we reach out to the rest of the planet.
Ja, ich denke, der Unterschied, ich gehe mal auf Ihre Frage ein, und zwar die Frage, warum haben wir es geschafft und warum haben es so viele andere Muslime nicht geschafft. Wir hatten unseren ganzen Mut zusammengerissen und haben unsere Logik und Argumentationsfähigkeit und die kritische Analyse benutzt, um unseren Glauben zu hinterfragen. Und wir waren stark genug, uns den Fakten zu stellen, die viele Muslime nicht tun. Viele Muslime leben in einer kognitiven Dissonanz, und man kann mit irrationalen Menschen nicht rational diskutieren. Und deshalb ist es äußerst schwierig, mit rationalen Argumenten auf einen Muslim zuzugehen oder als Muslim rational sich dem Islam und den islamischen Texten zu nähern und dann sich die Texte anzusehen und zu sagen, der Prophet ist auf einem Hybridwesen in den Himmel geflogen, hat einen menschlichen Kopf und der Rest war ein Pferd. Ja, eigentlich unmöglich, aber hey, Gott kann es ja. Also ich glaube mal, dass das funktioniert. Und schon ist die ganze Argumentation und Logik vom Tisch. Ich muss sagen, Logik und Argumentation, und der Titel, mit dem unsere Ex-Muslim-Konferenz angekündigt worden ist, war unter meinem Namen, unter meinem Bild habe ich gesagt, Fakten sind der größte Feind des Islam. Und ich sage, solange man knallharte Fakten auf den Tisch legt, so werden auch Muslime erschüttert von diesen Fakten. Ich habe in meiner Echokammer gelebt und wollte nichts von diesen Fakten hören. Aber der Moment, als ich aus meiner Echokammer herausgestiegen bin und wollte großschnäuzig mit Christen und mit Atheisten und mit allen möglichen Leuten unterschiedlicher Weltanschauungen diskutieren, da bin ich auf den Arsch gefallen. Vielen Dank.
Wir haben zwei weitere Wortmeldungen aus dem Publikum, die wir jetzt aufgreifen.
Ich habe eine Frage. Sie unterstützen ja, dass viele von der Religion wegkommen. Es kommen auch viele weg, und ich kenne auch einige Ex-Muslime, die zu einer anderen Religion zugefunden haben. Christen, bekannt ist hier zum Beispiel die Sabatina James hier, die auch hier in Berlin lebt. tun Sie diese auch in euren Kreis mit aufnehmen, dass Sie mit unterstützt? Das würde mich interessieren.
Was it exclusively for atheists?
First question, don't answer yet, please. Just 1 second and we'll give you some more questions, okay?
Meine Frage an euch, die ihr zum Teil ja schon länger auch in westlichen Ländern lebt, ist, wie schätzt ihr die Situation ein, dass wir sozusagen über Erziehung und Sozialisation auch Familien und gerade auch jüngere Kinder oder Jugendliche sozusagen darin stützen können, wenn die merken, dass sie sehr unsicher sind und dass sie sozusagen mit den Vorzügen, die ihnen die westliche Gesellschaft bietet, doch eigentlich wesentlich mehr d'accord gehen als mit dem, was die Community ihnen und die Familie ihnen bietet. Und wir ja immer wieder das Problem haben, dass Erziehung und Sozialisation sozusagen wie so eine Indoktrination auf lange Zeit läuft. Wie schätzt ihr sozusagen die Möglichkeiten ein, da einzuwirken?
So let's talk Western values or secular values. Which values would you like? Secular values, Western values? Secular values. So she thinks Western values are secular.
Muslimische Gemeinden müssen für ihre Irrlehren in die Verantwortung genommen werden. Und ich bin nicht so fest im Islam, was sind die Irrlehren und wie könnten denn die Gemeinden in die Verantwortung genommen werden?
So, me not being a professional, knowledgeable person in Islamic topics, what are the heresies that people issue and utter, and how can we get hold of these people? How can we deal with them?
Take them by if we want to take them by their responsibility, how can we make them responsible?
Yes.
You know, I think that's what the main point of the question. Yes. You know, we're talking about responsibility, and they should take responsibility. How we can make them take them? Huh?
And in which way? What does Islam teach?
Ich habe eher eine praktische Frage. Also ich arbeite als Lehrer an einer Brennpunktschule mit über 90% Ausländeranteil, davon die meisten Moslems. Bei den Lehrern ist das immer sehr schwierig, die wissen immer nicht, wie sollen sie mit umgehen. Habt ihr da eine Empfehlung? Und meine zweite Frage ist, Cat Stevens, ja, welche Rolle hat er eigentlich in London und welche Macht hat er da eigentlich? Das würde ich auch mal interessieren.
Okay, I have, my first question is of a more practical nature.
One last question.
The question would be, how can we raise the rate of people stepping out of the closet being unbeliever? No, I think many people live in the society but keep it to themselves that they lost faith. And how can we build support structures to get them being open about it?
You addressed concerns about refugees who come here with dangerous ideologies, and that how that should be kind of limited, right? So my question is, like, since a lot of those immigrants and refugees come here with children, families, people who really need help, and even if their ideologies are bad, they're very likely to be in serious danger or die if sent back. So I've been struggling with the question of how can we address this concern without infringing on those people's human rights and their safety.
Also wir stehen im Zwiespalt, dass wir Menschen Schutz geben wollen, die angegriffen sind, obwohl ihre Werte unserer Werteordnung widersprechen. Wie sollen wir uns in diesem Konflikt verhalten?
I come from Turkey, and the first speaker was warning us about what's happening in Europe. I actually wrote a piece about that about 2 years ago with the headline, "A Recipe for Civil War." And that's what it is. On the one hand, you've got Muslim extremism, radicalization. On the other hand, you've got the right-wingers and Christian radicalization. I come from Turkey. Turkey used to be a quote-unquote kind of secular country, but not really, but it looked like it. Lots of my Pakistani friends, when they used to go to Turkey and they came back, said, Turkey is not a Muslim country. They drink beer, women don't wear hijab. It's not a Muslim country. And back then it was true. But now it is no longer true. Now Turkey is an Islamic state. And it's a warning for the West, it's a warning for Europe. Just to give you an example, if you travel by German train in the German countries and you go to the restaurant, you cannot get a dish with pork, which should give you pause for thought. Thank you very much.
Eine Warnung, die Türkei hat sich zu einem islamischen Land entwickelt und hat ihre säkulare Orientierung von Kemal Atatürk zum größten Teil aufgegeben, zumindest die politische Klasse. Ich würde sagen, das Volk in Istanbul hoffentlich noch nicht, das war jetzt mein Kommentar. The people in Istanbul, they are not completely
no,
d'accord.
They are. It's over.
It's over.
It's over.
Also,
I can never go back.
He thinks Turkey can never go back to the secular culture Kemal Atatürk is established in Turkey. And he tells us this is a warning to Germany what can happen with Islam. And we should be careful. So, jetzt zurück zu den Fragen. Hoffentlich haben die unsere Gäste fleißig mitgehört. Who would like to talk first? Would you like to answer to a question?
Yeah, maybe answer some of them. First, the question, how did you practically left Islam? As Armin said, you stopped believing in God or Allah or whatever, and then some of us start to replace superstition with science, misogyny, with feminism, etc. You start to become more civilized, if I may say. Regarding why there are still Muslims, like there are still Christians, and it's mostly an emotional matter. And being an atheist, especially ex-Muslim, it requires a lot of moral courage and mental strength, because it's not easy, because we get really, really brainwashed very badly since childhood. That's why I think we should also direct a lot of our efforts to save children and teens. Because like when you get a little older, it's like really hard to change. How can you encourage people to come out from the closet? Well, you welcome them in very warm communities. You protect them from discrimination, you protect their personal safety, and because they will lose a lot of things. They will lose everyone. They might lose their jobs, they might lose a lot of stuff. So we need to take care of them. Regarding whether we would welcome ex-Muslims who turn to Christianity, Judaism, or whatever, yeah, I think everybody's welcomed. However, their views will be challenged. Okay. Regarding how to encourage Enlightenment values and secularism, well, you give platform to people like us, you popularize science, philosophy, things like that. Perfect.
Thank you very much. So Harris would like to answer first.
Yes. Guten Abend, Deutschland. Might not be that good, but right. Okay, so there are quite a few questions. I'm not going to address all of them. I'll just address some of them. How do you leave Islam? You know, when we become Muslims, and Muslims are very concerned about converting the world into Islam, not necessarily always by force, but you know, through dawah, what we call it, just they welcome, they show how beautiful Islam is, they leave the bad bits out, they send all the nice bits to you, and then people, a lot of, I say gullible white people actually convert, and usually it's the white women for some reason always end up converting, because little Abdullah down the road asked her out for a coffee sometime, and then you know she fell for him. So you actually get to say that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the last prophet. So I've actually got a little shahada of my own as well. So whenever I want to trust that someone is a genuine ex-Muslim, I get them to say the shahada, which is they just have to say there is no God. So that's how I make them ask whether they've left Islam or not. Now, why others are not leaving Islam? This is why a lot of ex-Muslims are not coming out, because that's what happens when you say that you are an atheist, and especially bigger your audience, worse the blowback on you. I would grant that a lot of people are still Muslims, but they are Muslims because they're living in an echo chamber. I mean, when I was a Muslim for most of my teenage years, I didn't know anything different until I actually became aware of the other side of the arguments. Richard Dawkins remained the biggest hero for me. His book and his videos educated me a lot about the other side of the argument. But a lot of young Muslims in Egypt or Iran or Pakistan, they have never heard the other side of the argument. This is why it is very important that we keep talking about these issues. I make videos in Urdu, which is the Pakistani language. I'm the only, out of a country of 220 million people, I'm the only Pakistani who can actually speak about these issues openly with my face out and in Urdu language. There's no other Pakistani out of 220 million people. Now, someone said Western values, secularism are Western values or something. This is why I just wanted to say something about the values, how we label values, because sometimes they can become a hindrance as well. A lot of Pakistanis, a lot of Iranians and Egyptians, they don't adopt the Enlightenment values because they think these are Western values. Like you wear jeans, that's Western, that's not us, we are better than that. Or you speak English, whoa, that's Western language, we have our own language. So I call them humanist values or Enlightenment values. And by the way, secularism is actually not a Western value. Secularism, Cyrus the Great was the first one who actually spoke about secularism, and he was Persian, great army here. But there's so many other great values that have been invented in the West, and we should celebrate them. But we should celebrate them not as a regional value, we should celebrate them as humanist values, that us humans sat down and we came up with these great values, and we should celebrate them. And someone also asked, what are the problems with Islam? Why religion is bad, or why should it be banned? How can we deal with them? Well, I have written a book on Islam and why I left Islam, so you're more than welcome to get it. It is at the back, there's a girl there selling it, so if you really do want to get it. I think I'll leave a couple other questions for some other people.
With regards to ex-Muslim Christians or people that left Islam and converted to other religions, the thing is that the problem that we have is that we don't have support for atheists. When Muslims leave Islam and they become Christians, there are churches and Christian communities waiting for them to accept them. When Muslims are attacked, there are Muslims there to protect them and provide a community. When Christians are attacked, there are Christians there waiting for them to provide a community and support. When Jews are attacked, there are Jewish communities waiting for them. When Hindus are attacked, the Hindus make sure they raise hell about the fact that Hindus are attacked. But when atheists are attacked, there is not much support for them. We are filling a vacuum right now that doesn't exist. That's why our ex-Muslim communities are mostly focused on atheists, ex-Muslims, because everyone else already has way more support than we ever get. With regards to the migrants, and when they come here, what do we do for them to start accepting Enlightenment values? And also, I tie that into the other question with regards to how do we hold people responsible? I think they both have the same answer. You don't accept people that don't have Enlightenment values. You don't bring them here. You don't understand how unique these places are that have Enlightenment values. These are geographically, historically, people have bled for this. And you are just giving it up. You are just giving it up based on you think you're being humanists by accepting people with shitty ideas, but you're actually being anti-humanist because these few islands of Enlightenment values are the hope for the rest of the planet. So for the sake of planet Earth, Please don't fuck it up.
Du hattest diese Frage gestellt, wie kann man ausselektieren, ohne die Menschenrechte der Menschen zu verletzen, die zu uns kommen. Ich will nicht mehr sehr viel dazu sagen, weil alles, was man sagen kann, hat er gesagt. Wir brauchen keine Menschen mit shitty ideas. Wir brauchen sie nicht. Und wenn wir wenn wir ein wenig Wert darauf legen, wo wir leben und wofür diese Region, das Westeuropa und besonders Deutschland gekämpft haben und wo wir hingekommen sind, ich möchte ein kleines Beispiel nennen, damit jeder sich die Frage selbst beantworten kann. Deutschland ist zu einem Irrenhaus geworden. Wir haben nach dem Zweiten Weltkrieg den Verlust von 6 Millionen Juden zu beklagen. Es gab einen gewaltigen Genozid an den Juden. Wir haben, oder ich nicht, aber die Nachgeneration und die Bundesregierung und die Regierenden, die dann gekommen sind in den Generationen, haben hart gearbeitet, damit wir wieder Juden in Deutschland ein Zuhause geben können. Wir haben es irgendwo geschafft, dass irgendwie, ja, leider nicht besonders erfolgreich, aber wir haben es irgendwie wieder geschafft, dass Juden wieder gerne nach Deutschland gekommen sind. Und jetzt, wie die Weltmeister, exportieren wir wieder Judenhasser und solche Leute, die wieder Juden nachdenklich werden lassen, ob sie ihre Koffer packen und besser nach Israel gehen. Das erklärt und beantwortet die Frage, wie wir mit solchen Leuten umgehen. Wir brauchen sie nicht. Haltet sie draußen, fragt sie, macht mit ihnen einen Staatsvertrag ein paar Jahre. Brechen Sie hier die Regeln, machen Sie hier Ärger, attackieren Sie, wie dieser palästinensische Flüchtling in Berlin vor dem jüdischen Restaurant. Gebt ihm ein Ticket und sendet ihn zurück, da wo dieses real-islamische Utopia ist, und beschützt die Menschen, wie die Juden, die hierher gekommen sind, die hier produktiv sind, die hier niemanden stören, und schmeißt die Störer raus und pfeift auf die Menschenrechte, wenn diese Menschen auf diese Menschenrechte von den Menschen pfeifen, die in unserem Land friedlich leben wollen. Und deswegen ist die Ansage ganz klar. Wir begrüßen die Menschen, die vor Krieg und vor Elend flüchten, aber bitte unterscheidet zwischen solchen Menschen, die wirklich vor Krieg flüchten möchten, geflüchtet sind, und solchen, die niemals für unsere Gesellschaft produktiv werden. Und deswegen ist die Frage beantwortet. Wir wollen sie nicht, ganz einfach.
Ja, bitte bei der Wahl.
There were 3 teachers in the room who would like to know how to act in their classrooms. Have you any ideas for us? And then Mimsi would like to answer questions. No, this was the missing question, I think.
Christine, weil ich kann das ergänzen, darf ich ganz kurz etwas dazu sagen? Da war eine Frage über Cat Stevens, die Rolle von Cat Stevens in London.
And the Cat Stevens question. Okay.
Yeah,
but don't miss the teacher question.
Vielen Dank für diese Frage. Ich werde die nicht beantworten. Mimsis Vater hat in dieser Schule von Cat Stevens gearbeitet, und Mimsi oder ihr Ehemann wird darauf eingehen. Mimsi, can you please answer to the question, what is the role of Cat Stevens in UK? How powerful is this guy? What is he doing?
Okay. I mean, like any famous convert to Islam, I think he kind of goes on that list. He's not the only one. But yeah, he definitely was a huge influence and kind of a reaffirmation for everyone to say, look, you know, this guy wasn't even Muslim and he loves our religion, and you know, and then he was kind of a poster boy for all the Muslims to see, and then that kind of, as I said, kind of reaffirms everything for everyone. He set up schools and sort of organisations, summer camps, all kinds of things to kind of have a Muslim space for Muslims basically. And you know, it's all kind of tied with many of the questions, but you know, having this Muslim bubble is what is so detrimental. It's why they can't ask a lot of questions, or why they perhaps don't see the other side, is because this bubble is created where you just are stuck in this Muslim identity, this Muslim world, and you don't really see what's kind of beyond it. And that's why integration is so, so important as well, and just having, you know, this platform like this for us to speak and talk about it. You know, Muslims are protected because they're a minority group. And I'm going off topic, but because they're a minority group, you know, people feel like they need to protect them and like, oh, don't insult them, don't hurt them. You know, to answer a few of those, I think that the thing that we need to do is allow a platform for us to speak and continue to speak about it.
So, just a couple of questions. Someone asked about schools and integration, and I think this is a very, very important question. First thing you do, or first thing you don't do, is lower your own values for different communities. Okay? So if there are Muslims or any other religious group, Jews, Hindus, Christians, whatever it is, different race, ethnicity, whatever, if you have your own values that you hold in your society, and those values have given you the kind of life that you have now, if some communities find it hard to adjust, you help them reach that height, you don't lower the bar. Because this is what happens, we say, you know what, these guys, they don't really get this, let's make it easier for them. And the best example I can give, if there's a group of students, and the teacher has, you know, the teacher tells to one group of students, you have to get A, and one group of students, you get C's, that's fine. Those guys that you say, it's okay, you get C's, they will always be low achievers. The guys that you say you have to get A's, they will be high achievers. But what happens is, when it comes to values, it's much worse, because they say, hey, this is what you taught us, you allowed us to act like this, and now we're acting like this, why are you complaining? So from a very young age, you have to have the same standard for every community. Yes, there will be times where it will be hard to adjust. That's fine, that's part of growing pains. But you do not lower your standards. For the other, I think someone asked, what about ex-Muslims who become Christian or Jew, whatever it is. I say this as a general rule, and I agree with what you said as well, I mean about, you know, there not being a platform for atheists. But in general, I say, I don't care what religion you belong to, if you're ex-Muslim this or ex-Muslim that, Jew, Hindu, Christian. If you believe in freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, you are on my team. Simple as that. Simple as that. There are Muslims that I know, Muslims that work with us, or people from different faiths that work with us, and they say, yes, I'm not an atheist, but I agree with your project. People should be allowed to express themselves freely and not fear any retaliation. And I think someone asked about, why aren't there more ex-Muslims coming out? One common theme amongst ex-Muslims is that they always think that they're the only ex-Muslim. They think, I'm the first one to discover that Islam doesn't make sense. The reason why that is because there's a lack of visibility. They don't see these faces, you know, people from Muslim backgrounds. They might be in a Muslim country, or even in Western countries. They think, oh, how could someone leave Islam? How is that possible? We are living proof that you can leave, that you can live a happy life, and I think the most important thing is visibility. They need to see our faces, know our lives, know what we stand for, and we have a range of political, religious, moral views that they can pick from. We don't think the same, we're all individuals, and I think this will help people understand that there are many ex-Muslims out there, and I think you said before, there's an iceberg of Muslims in the West and in the Muslim world. I'm telling you, what the printing press did to Christianity, the internet will do to Islam. Thank you.
Thank you, but we often see that the internet is against us because it gets controlled more and more, and we were pushed out of the internet. We will. Okay, thank you. Freedom of speech.
Yes.
So let's go to our next guest, Harris Sultan.
Thank you. I want to say thank you very much for hosting us in this beautiful city and country of yours. I want to say I'm a huge fan of Arminius. His bravery still resonates with me, and he's been a great hero for me in my personal journey as well. And I hope to act like Armenians who stood for the freedom and independence of his land against an enemy that was incomprehensibly large. Now, of course, times have changed. We are not invaded by the large armies sent by dictators in a foreign land. We are invaded by ideas that threaten better ideas. The flow of ideas has been a great strength of the Western world, and it's the reason why the West leads the world in democracy, education, art, commerce, science, human rights, you name it. So you must be thinking invasion of ideas is a good thing, so why am I worried about it? It makes us more versatile, it makes us more dynamic. I'm actually not worried about the invasion of ideas except for one idea. An idea that demands supremacy, it demands respect, it demands untouchable and critique-free status, and an idea that we must stop taking other ideas. Unfortunately, this is what Islam in the current form has become. As an atheist, to me, all religions are dangerous. All religions have historically tried to assert their supremacist idea over all other ideas. But fortunately, your own heroes like Nietzsche, like Kant, Karl Marx, and many other great thinkers took the sting out of Christianity. It was the destruction of the idea that wanted supremacy over all other ideas. Well done. You developed freedom of speech and invented democracy. This is what made your civilization the best we've ever had. Unfortunately, better than our civilization. However, unfortunately, it seems to me the natural equilibrium is catching up with the West, and not how it should have been. It is not that East that is rising up to meet the West in democracy, secularism and human rights, but it is the West that is lowering itself to meet the East in the destruction of human rights, contamination of democracy and secular ideas. What do I mean by that? Let's start with human rights. Freedom of speech is the most basic of human rights. If we can't give our people food, shelter, education, health, then at least we can give them a right to whinge or complain about it or talk about it. Freedom of speech has not just been a tool of intellectuals and great thinkers, but it has also, more importantly, been a weapon of the poor and underprivileged masses. Freedom of speech is what makes democracies worthwhile. What is the value of freedom of speech? Ask those who've never had it. Ask the value of freedom of speech to those of us who grew up in a society where simply saying, I don't think I believe in Allah, I don't think Muhammad was a real prophet, just saying this could land you in prison or worse, get hung. There are 13 countries where apostasy, you can be hung for apostasy. Ask those women in countries where there is no freedom of speech, how they can't talk about the feminist values because you are not allowed to talk about the feminist values as it collides with the Islamic values. Ask the value of freedom of speech to those LGBTQ activists in Islamic countries, how they are helpless in making their society more tolerant towards LGBTQ because speaking about LGBTQ issues is un-Islamic. Okay, let's not go too far. Ask this young gentleman here named Mohammed Hisham, who was humiliated on national Egyptian TV, beaten up by his family for simply saying, I'm an atheist. Just, I'm an atheist. I don't know what would have happened if you had said you were gay as well. Good idea. Something that would not even have been noticed in a Western country. If he was from a Christian background or any other background, no one would have cared. All of these people will tell you how they envy the West for its freedom of speech. Now you must be thinking, we're good. You know, not so fast. When the same people flee their home countries and find refuge in the Western countries, they're gagged, they're called racist, Islamophobes for simply carrying out the work they've been carrying out in their home countries. This young man I just mentioned, he's had his application for asylum already refused once. The most amazing conundrum is you are given all the freedoms to speak when it comes to attacking the local Western problems. You know, like problems of Christianity or the problem of racism or other right-wing issues. That's fine, you're a hero if you talk about that, which is good. You should be a hero for talking about that. But when we come to the West and criticize the same problems we have in our own Islamic world, our freedom to speak is taken away from us under the label of hate speech. This is the new Western standard. It is free speech if you attack the far right for its homophobic and misogynistic speech, but it's hate speech if you attack Islamists for their homophobia and their misogyny. I really appeal to all of you wonderful people, protect your freedom of speech. You take away freedom of speech from your society, you set the foundations for becoming North Korea or Iran. When an ex-Muslim speaks about the ills of Islam, he's not being racist towards Muslims because he still has Muslim family members. Ex-Muslim are the Enlightenment activists of the Muslim world. They are the champions of equality, women empowerment, and equal human rights. Do not suppress them. Do not suppress their freedom of speech by shutting them down. Now, let's talk about democracy, another great Western value. When you artificially change the demographics of your country by importing millions of refugees who share virtually nothing with your values, you are basically committing a national suicide. I've been told that the official numbers are close to 2 million, but the real number could be a lot more since the refugee crisis began in 2011-2012. In a country with a population of 80 million, that's about 2.5% of your population. You might be thinking it's just 2.5%, it's just a drop in the ocean. But you've got to remember this is an artificially induced demographic change. Let me explain to you how. Guess what was the percentage of vote difference between Trump and Hillary? It was actually less than 2.5%, it was 2%. It was 2% of the votes that Hillary won, but Hillary got, but Trump still won. The point is 2% of votes matter a lot. Now when these 2.5% of refugees become voters, they will influence your way of life. Unless they obviously integrate. And you can tell me how that's going. Sharia, they will demand Sharia courts as it has already happened in England. Sharia court, not dangerous? Sharia court will basically mean a Muslim man can beat up his disobedient wife and resolve the matter in his house. Women will be given less share of inheritance. So in Germany, German Muslim women will be openly and legally discriminated against. Don't rely on the bleeding heart leftists to come to the rescue of these poor German Muslim women. They won't do anything, as it is happening right now in Britain. Britain has Sharia courts where women get their reduced inheritance as per the Islamic law. And the left is totally silent about it in the name of tolerance towards other cultures. And that's just the snippet of Sharia court.
Exactly.
The real Sharia is beyond your wildest imagination in its cruelty. So basically, they're saying if other culture is misogynistic, we have to respect it in the name of tolerance. This is the modern left for you. Do not be like them. Now, Muslims come in all shape and sizes, but they all believe their religion is superior. Their values are better than your Western values. I grant you that a lot of Muslims will not actively take part in, let's say, bringing in Sharia or Islamification of Germany, but when a conservative Muslim leader does contest elections in Germany, regardless of what he's going for, regardless of what his policies are, all the Muslims will vote for him. Sounds too simplistic? Let me point out the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. He got almost all of the Muslim votes just because he was a Muslim. The good thing is that Sadiq Khan was not a crazy Sharia-loving Muslim. But what if he was a conservative? Or worse, an Islamist? Do you think bending over backwards, liberals would not have voted for him in the name of tolerance and acceptance? Do you really think that those Muslims who believe their religion is superior, no matter how moderate they are, would not have voted for him? It's a no-brainer. London dodged a bullet. But how often is this going to happen? Maybe the system has some sort of a firewall that protects crazy conservatives from contesting elections, or maybe it was just a coincidence. Either way, your democracy is now hanging by a thread. The strangest phenomenon is that conservative Muslims are right-wing by definition. When the Western liberals support conservative Muslims or conservative Islam, they basically end up contradicting themselves. They are supporting homophobia, misogyny, free speech suppressing group of people. And not only that, they're also shutting people like us down for speaking against the right wing, which is the right wing of Islam. So in reality, this far left has become far right. Now this is up to you everyday Germans to wake up and stop this madness. Now, as I said, I don't want Germany to lose its commitment to human rights. I am not asking you to turn your back on people from oppressed and war-torn countries looking at you for help. But in the process, do not turn your back on your democracy and your values. There should be a limited amount of intake of refugees, and within that you should only take refugees that show some sympathy, not a lot, some sympathy and some commonality with German values. You have heard from Mohammed Hisham and his story. Now let me tell you another such individual. I can't even name him publicly. So I called him Spartacus because in the face of certain death, he stood for his views and beliefs, or lack thereof. Now this young man from Pakistan had his own mother collaborated with the local imam of the mosque and got a fatwa issued against her own son that whoever beheads him will go to heaven without any questions. She set upon thugs on him, who beat and tortured him for a day for simply saying that he didn't believe in Allah. Luckily, he escaped, and he was on the run for 8 years until he heard about me and asked me for help. I didn't show much interest because I knew that no country will actually take him in. There is no special humanitarian visa for victims of Islam or religious dissidents. But his persistence convinced me to do something, and we managed to get him out of Pakistan to Nepal, where he has been waiting for the last 8 months or so, and waiting for his refugee status to be granted. Now, looking at Mohammed Hisham's story, I'm losing hope about Spartacus' future as well. Now ask yourself, is the system working? We can have hundreds of thousands of Islamists pouring into Europe, but genuine refugees, genuine victims of Islam, like Spartacus or Mohammed Hisham, can't enter Europe with dignity. Should these people not be on top of our list of humanitarian visas? I want to conclude the speech with a message. I want you to take a good look at your priorities. I am not a German, but even I can see which direction your country is headed. And it's not in the best interest of the Germans. This is more or less the problem in all the Western countries, but my adoptive country, like Australia, and other countries like Canada and US have a luxury of geographical isolation. Europe, unfortunately, doesn't have it, but that is no excuse to become reckless. Your priorities should be the welfare and preservation of German people and German values respectively. Do not take away free thinking and freedom of speech in the name of tolerance. Do not turn your back on human rights and legitimate refugees, like Spartacus and Mohammed Hisham, but do not clump them together with Islamists and jihadists turning up on your borders. Vielen Dank.
Thank you so much for these clear words. We are afraid to speak out loudly. Thank you.
All right. So my topic is Islamic reform, and before I start, I just want to mention that in the past few years, I have led a war against Islamic reform, and I have managed to convince a lot of people within the ex-Muslim community that used to back Islamic reform to now abandon it. And the reason why I think this is not just something that is wrong, but something that is extremely dangerous and need to be fought against is because I think the Enlightenment values in North American and West European countries are under threat by some of the most anti-Enlightenment ideas, which are Islamic ideas, but in these countries, they are mostly, the reform argument is used as a way to shield the toxicity of how dangerous these values are, how Islamic values are. And because unlike in Islamic countries, the Islamic reform argument is used as PR for Islam, that's what, and how unique and sensitive it is to preserve Enlightenment values in these countries. That's why I'm focusing a lot on showing people how big of a mistake it is to support any form of Islamic reform. Before I go through the arguments people have for Islamic reform and destroy them one by one, let me just give you some context of where I'm coming from. I grew up in Iran in a very liberal family that didn't take Islam seriously at all, but I could not understand how could people consider themselves Muslim and not take Islam seriously. As soon as I figured out that hell was an option, I realized that any sane human being would focus their entire time and energy and thoughts to avoid going to hell. Nothing else could be a higher priority than that. And the fact that, and this was me as a kid, not understanding how could people around me believe in hell and worry about buying a car or their grades or what to wear in the next party or whether the curtains match the car. But I couldn't understand how could anybody think about anything else other than avoiding eternal torture. And I remember actually lighting a match and putting it on my skin just to see how much it hurts to burn in hell. And then I tried to imagine that for thousands of years, and like there's no way that anybody could tolerate this. So when I realized a loophole, I took advantage of it, because another thing it told us in Iran, and I understand a lot of Muslims don't believe in this, but this is what we were told in Iran, in our school, that children are pure. Unlike in Christianity where you're born with sin, in Islam, you're pure, you're sinless when you're born, you're ma'soom. And you can't sin until you hit the age of reason. So, and they told us those ages for boys are 15 and for girls that's 9. So, based on that, whatever I do before age 15 is not a sin. There's no sin before age 15. I just realized that they told us suicide is a sin in Islam. Suicide is a sin. But they also told us there's no sin before age 15. So if I kill myself before age 15, I die without sin. And I can't go to hell if I have no sin. So there's only one place for me to go, that's heaven. I asked my religious teacher, why wouldn't I just kill myself to make sure I don't go to hell? And he told me that, well, because if you earn heaven, you go to a higher part of heaven. Like apparently heaven has different layers. The highest part is for martyrs, that's where Muhammad is. But the lowest part is for people that died just because they died as children. I said, I don't give a fuck which part of heaven I go, I just don't want to go to hell. I'll take a parking lot for eternity as long as I make sure that I don't take any burning. So I jumped out of the window from my school. I broke both of my legs, my left arm, I fractured my back, I was in a wheelchair on my bed for 7 months. And the only reason why I didn't try again was because I saw what it did to my parents. I saw my dad cry for the first time, I saw my mom just collapse on the ground in the hospital. So I felt like, I should have thought about them as well. So I didn't try it. But there's a lot of stories after that. But the reason why I bring up this story is because even to this day, I think my logic was sound. I think given the premises that I was given, my conclusion was correct. My logic is still solid. I couldn't understand why more people weren't taking advantage of this loophole. Like, why would you gamble potentially going to hell? Everybody, I found the get out of jail free card, I found a loophole in the system and I took it. And that was a rational thing to do. But the irrationality was not the logic, was the premises, right? So my argument is when you have false premises, when you're dealing with false premises, even with sound logic, you end up with false conclusions. And false conclusions lead to dangerous behavior, right? The idea of Islamic reform is suggesting we keep the false premises, but maybe we could lead people to different conclusions. No, when you have false premises, when you're dealing with shitty nonsense, with fiction, when you're dealing with fairy tales, the only way to get to good conclusion is by promoting false logic. Are we on the side of promoting false logic? Are you going to lie to people? What happened to intellectual honesty? We're atheists. We don't believe in bullshit. Are you going to tell people that this verse... Are we as atheists that were against religion and now trying to promote a different religion to replace one lie with another lie just because it's not harmful to us? Are we actually actively thinking that we are going to go lie to people? Do we think that we are smart enough, we are good enough for atheism, but these lower people, these masses, like, no, let's just give them some bullshit, as long as they're not hurting us. How selfish do we have to be to not give people the option to believe in the truth? Anyways, the main thing that people, the number one argument that people have against me when they say, like, I mean, listen, there's 1.8 billion Muslims in the world. Do you really think that they're all going to leave Islam tomorrow and become atheists? And I tell them, do you really think that tomorrow they're all going to become reformists? The argument is not it's not all or none thing. The argument is which one method works better. Neither all of them are not going to leave Islam, all of them are not going to become reformists, but my method works, your method doesn't. I have the numbers to back it up. What do you have to show? You have nothing. You're telling people that, hey, this verse that tells you that, hey, you can beat your wife, it actually means you can tickle your wife. And like, what the fuck are you talking about? It says right there, you can beat your wife. I'm telling them, you're lying to them about their own scripture. It's written there in black and white. I'm telling them, hey, have you considered that maybe there is no God? That's an easier argument. By the way, even if you succeed with that one verse, now you have to repeat that with another 1,000 verses and another 1,000 hadiths. Good luck with that. I have to just ask one question. What if there is no God? And I don't even have to convince them that there is no God. I just have to give them some small seed of doubt. Small seed of doubt, that's all I need. That's all I need to make them focus on this life rather than the next one. Hey. Another thing regarding this 1.8 billion Muslims is that the war that we're fighting against Islam is not a war between non-Muslims and Muslims. The war that we're fighting is within every individual. Okay? When we're fighting Islam, we're fighting Islam within the mind of a Muslim. So, but people think like, but Muslims this, but Muslims that. As if Muslims are just Muslim and nothing but Muslims. Muslims are influenced by many things. One of them is Islam. When you're fighting Islam within one individual, even if they don't leave Islam, you're reducing the influence of Islam in that one individual. A Muslim is just like the rest of us, and a Muslim is influenced by Islam, by the podcast, by other things, by the podcasts they listen to, by the books that they read, by the YouTube channels that they watch, by their parents, by their friends in school, by their teachers. When we are competing against Islam with better values, that is, with beer, maybe we find Islam with beer. What we're doing is, the influence of Islam on every Muslim is always a negative one. It's always a toxic one. There is no positive thing about the influence of Islam on an individual. But what we're doing within an individual when we defeat Islam is we're making the effect of Islam on that one individual less compared to other sources of influence. Some people ask me, I mean, what's wrong with making Islam more progressive? What's wrong with making Islam more, LGBT friendly, women rights friendly? Why can't we have another version of Islam that is more compatible with Enlightenment values? What's wrong with that? And how are you going to do that? The place that you had an influence was when you could have introduced a bullshit filter to individuals. If you don't have that filter, if you don't teach people how to recognize what's true and what's not true, after they pass that, after they already fail to recognize what's bullshit, what filter are you going to introduce to them to land on Enlightenment values? When they pass that barrier, when they didn't have a filter to recognize what's true, where they land is not really that much in your control anymore. They can land anywhere, it's random. If there are many of them that are good people and peaceful, that's not because of Islam, that's because they are good people. The only place that you could have had an influence was that logic filter, was giving people critical thinking skills to realize that the Prophet cannot cut a moon in half and go to heaven on a horse or whatever that thing was. But one example that I give to people is imagine that some guy shows up in a bar. Actually, I have two examples, so bear with me. And finds a napkin, and the napkin says, "Kill people that don't believe in this napkin." And then you go behead me. Like, what are you doing? Like, I'm following napkin religion. Like, are you serious? Like, oh, you're apostate. I'm gonna kill you. Okay? Like, okay, well that's nonsense. That's horrible. But then let's say somebody comes and picks up that napkin and says, like, no, you misunderstood this napkin. He says, it means kill them with love and passion. It's not about beheading people. And then you go around and you're saying, like, you know what? I like this second guy. I like people looking at napkins in the bar and trying to read positive messages out of them and follow napkins in a positive way. And like, you're endorsing following random napkins in a bar. Do you realize you're giving an argument? Are you not asking, hey, is the question here not, why are you listening to napkins with writings on them on the bar? Is that not the main question that you should be asking here? People say, like, listen, if we lie to people, we could get short-term benefits. If we tell people, yeah, maybe in the long run, people, we could educate people, we could give them critical thinking skills, and they will become atheists and whatever. But in the short term, if we tell people that, hey, Islam is woman-friendly, Islam is science-friendly, Islam is LGBT-friendly, we could get short-term gains. You know, you do your thing, they do their thing. The example I give for that is, imagine a doctor shows up at this village and sees that there's a disease in this village that everybody is infected by. And she decides that she wants to come up with a medicine that cures this disease, and she figures it out. But she needs to sell it so she could get more money so that she makes more medicine. But the people in the village don't believe her and they don't buy her medicine. So she comes up with a story and she says that, listen, on my way here, there was a fairy in the forest. And the fairy in the forest told me that to give you this potion, not medicine, it's potion. And as soon as she comes up with the stories, people are lining up and buying her medicine, right? So she tells, and people buy her medicine and she cures the disease, and then she leaves and everybody is cured, and like, well, good, she lied to them, but it worked. It was a good lie, it was a white lie. But the problem is, once she leaves, other people show up, and they're like, you know what? The fairies talked to me as well, and now they're selling water. They're selling water, but they're making money out of it. And now some other guy comes and actually sells drug, and like, you know what? The forest fairies also told me that they gave me this. And now people are becoming addicted, and now they're selling poison to people. The thing is that, yeah, if you had spent the time to educate people to why this medicine actually works, you might have gotten less short-term results. But because you didn't spread lies, you weren't responsible for creating, for endorsing, believing in nonsense, you didn't build the groundwork for other people to come misuse people's misinformation. The long-term benefits of fighting for the truth is always higher than the short-term benefit of spreading lies. Another thing people say is that, you know, but why would throw out the baby out with bathwater? Like, there are good messages in Islam. There are some things that we could keep. Let's get rid of the bad and keep the good. I say those good things, the so-called good things in the Quran are actually what makes the Quran more dangerous. They are the PR front of the toxic. They are the reason these religions still last. These vague verses in the Quran where you could read in different ways, that gives the religion the flexibility to, whenever it feels threatened, to go on defensive mode and act like cute and cuddly. And as soon as it gets the opportunity to come back, it becomes aggressive against and bites you in the ass. Well, you have to realize that these warm and fuzzy messages in Scripture are actually what makes it more dangerous and what makes it more toxic, not less. They tell me, like, how could you think Islamic reform doesn't work? Look, there's so many Muslims that are supporting secularism. I know my Muslim friends that show up in LGBT gay pride parade. There are Muslims that are fighting with me for secularism. And I say, okay, well, I also know a lot of Muslims that are vegan. Does that make veganism Islamic? I know a lot of Muslims that love Game of Thrones. Does that make loving Game of Thrones Islamic? What about knitting? There are many Muslims that do knitting. Does that make knitting Islamic? Muslims, the Muslims that do all these things, they are doing these things not because of Islam. They're doing it in spite of Islam. These people, these are Muslims that are better than Islam. Islam will always be anti-women. Islam will always be anti-LGBT. Islam will always be anti-secularism. Islam will always be anti-human, anti-science, anti-skepticism. Islam needs to die. There is any other set of ideologies, any other book, any other doctrine that endorsed slavery, wife-beating, torturing people that don't believe in it, killing groups of people, any other set of ideologies that promoted a fraction of the problematic teachings of the Quran would have not survived, and people would not be making excuses for it unless it was being labeled a religion. It's the religion label that makes people make excuses for the shittiest ideas on this planet. Another thing is that what reformists do is that they look at all these peaceful Muslims and they say, like, look, there's so many of them, and that's because of Islamic reform. Because of Islamic reform. But what is Islamic reform? Islamic reform is looking at Quranic verses and trying to come up with a different interpretation. But most Muslims, they don't read the Quran, they don't read the Hadith. These are nominal Muslims. These are not people that read the Quran and decided to intellectually come up with a different interpretation and not live Islamic life. Most Muslims are mostly thinking about living their lives. And the fact that they're living peaceful lives is not because they're following a reformed version of Islam, it's because they're ignoring Islam. The reformists are such a fringe group of people that they're even more fringe than the jihadis that people always want to point out how low they are. Without the support, with a fraction of the attention that the reformists have gotten, they look at the ex-Muslim movement. We have grown hundreds of thousands of people in the past few years, and people keep like, oh yeah, Islamic reform. What the fuck? Look over here. Look what we're doing without any of your support. I actually get back to why we don't get any of the support. They tell us some people need Islam. Some people need it. Some people are not mature enough. It just gives them hope. Nobody needs false beliefs. Everybody is better off believing in the truth. That's absolute nonsense. We wouldn't say that about any other false belief. We wouldn't say, some people need to believe vaccine causes autism. It's just what they need. They're not these dangerous ideas. We attack them, and we attack all false beliefs, but we need to attack Islamic false beliefs even more, given that how many people have been convinced that this set of false beliefs, maybe we shouldn't attack them. When people think that, you have to double down on attacking it. A lot of people say, by the way, I'm shortening it, there's a lot more I have to say, but I don't want to go on for too long. A lot of people say, what about Christianity? Christianity was reformed. Why, if Christianity was reformed, why can't Islam reform? I tell you, Christianity was never reformed. Christians were reformed. Christians were reformed by taking Christianity less seriously. Muslims can also reform by taking Islam less seriously. It wasn't the Reformation movement that put Islam in the back seat. If the Protestants were as violent and as superstitious, and sometimes even more so anti-women and anti-Semitic, and you know, everything that was wrong with Catholics was also wrong with the Protestants. The Reformation is not responsible for any progress. It is not responsible for putting Christian where it belongs, which is nowhere. But it was the Enlightenment movement which was a fight against Christianity. It was the Enlightenment movement that made Christian countries more advanced. What we want for Islam is not a Reformation movement. We want another Enlightenment movement in the Islamic world. We don't want another Martin Luther. We want more of Voltaire. In fact, if you look at what the Reformation movement was for Christianity, what was the message? The message is that you don't need the priest, you need to go directly to the Bible itself, you need to go to the text, it's by faith and faith alone. That was the main core message. We already had a Reformation movement like that in Islam. It's called Wahhabism. Imagine telling Muslims that they need to follow the Quran more directly. Yeah, that's not a good idea. Some people say, reform, I mean, you're actually wrong. Reform works. There are some people that reform works on. Like, maybe you do your atheism, but reform works for some people. Let's just keep it. Why can't you just let reformers do their thing? And you do your thing, let the reformers do their thing, right? I tell you that reform is a reaction to our fight against Islam. It's not de-Islamization. Doesn't come as a result of reform. Reform comes as a reaction to de-Islamization. It's a defense mechanism. We take charge against Islam, and Islam, as a defense mechanism for it to remain relevant, uses reform. But the thing is that we already are winning the de-Islamization. We don't need to give the excuse for them to stay around. That reaction is not necessary. We don't want to give excuses for Islam to live longer. We want Islam to die. I actually debated this with Sam Harris on the Secular Jihadist podcast. And Sam Harris told me on the podcast, he said, look, if you can make Islam 10% better, that's progress. And unfortunately, Ali Rizmi didn't let me continue because I was talking about reform that much, but this is what I wanted to say to him right after. But to be fair to Ali Rizmi, it was because I was talking about reform all show. So, but I would say, yeah, but that 10% improvement is not because of the reformists. It's because of people like us that are fighting against Islam. That's a reaction to us, not the reaction to the reformists. There has never been a religion or any form of authority that just looked within and decided, like, maybe we need to adopt to the modern. No, they were forced. They were forced by better ideas. Christianity was forced by better competing ideas to adopt. Islam will never, there's nothing in Islam within itself that will make Islam reform. Even if you look at these leaders of the reform movement in Islam, look at their journey, why they were radicals, and now say, well, we're not radical anymore, so reform could work. Look at their journey. It was never because they read the Quran one last time or read the Hadith one last time and decided, like, oh, the message is actually, I was pro-woman all along, I just was reading it wrong. No, it was other people. It was competing ideas. It was anti-Islamic messages, and they were convinced that the values in Islam is wrong, and they wanted an excuse to keep their Islam. But when they were convinced that the values in Islam is wrong, we have already won. We have already won them over. They would not go back to accepting those values. Why do we need to give them the comfort to keep their Islam? Why do we owe them that? We don't owe them that. Why? Because if we give them that, they will use it to keep the shitty ideas alive. Because they might read it differently, but other people that can read black and white, they can see it and know these people that take Islam seriously will follow it by the book, and these are always within. As long as Islam has anything to do with the Quran, it will always be against humanity. Some people say, why can't we change the definition of Islam? Why does it have to be so tied to the Quran? I'm like, okay, let's do your solution. Let's redefine Islam. This is as if somebody says, like, I found the cure for cancer. I found how to fix cancer. Let's redefine cancer. And now if I redefine cancer to something good, now cancer is not bad anymore. Well, if you redefine cancer, we still have that original cancer to deal with, and now people think cancer is not bad anymore because you're confusing them with definitions. If you redefine Islam, you have Islam 2.0 now. You didn't fix the problems with that shitty book. I don't know what you're going to call that, but a lot of people believe in the Quran, and that's still a problem. And now because you're using Islam for something that is not problematic, you're using the branding of Islam to provide cover for a lot of shitty ideas. Does that make sense?
Yes.
One other reason why I tell people reform doesn't work is because the reform narrative is not meant for Muslims. The reform narrative is meant for you guys, right? Muslims do not take reform seriously because, and let me tell you how ridiculous this reform is to Muslims, right? Every single verse in the Quran, every single dot, every single hadith has been written about and discussed for 1400 years by Shia and Sunni scholars. They have books upon books and walls filled with texts explaining every single detail and the context and the tafsir and commentary about the commentaries, right? And then you have these reformers coming in like, hey, have you considered that this verse that means that it's clearly saying this, it actually means something else? And Muslims are like, are you fucking serious? Like, who the fuck are you? Have you not seen how much we've talked about this? And the example that I give, that imagine that you have some Harry Potter fan fictions, right? And they are writing fan fiction, and they are trying to decide, there's a spell that somebody's casting, a wizard is casting a spell, and the other people are arguing that this doesn't make sense, because this wand doesn't have tear dragons in it, and there's no way to cast that spell without tear dragons in it. So these are people that are really hardcore Harry Potter fans, and they understand the internal rules within this world. Even though the world is not real, there's some internal structure to it, right? There's some internal logic to it, even though it's all fantasy. But imagine if somebody just joins this club and says, my wizard pulled out a lightsaber. People are like, what? Get the fuck out of here. Like, you clearly don't understand the rules within our universe, right? So what the reformists are to the Islamic world is a lightsaber in a Harry Potter world. People don't take them seriously. They clearly say, like, you guys are completely off. You have no idea what we're talking about. And a lot of Muslims don't understand that these people are not even talking to them. This is why the #1 fans of Islamic reformists are not Muslim. They're Westerners that want to be like, oh yeah, we have hope for Islam. You could be that, but you are the audience. You are the ones that are being fooled. Majid Nawaz once told me on the same podcast on secular jihadi, I told him that, these verses clearly mean this and that. And he told me that, and this is another argument that people have, like, Armin, you sound like a Wahhabi. Like, if you say these verses mean this, if you say these verses mean killing non-Muslims, and these verses mean that you're basically agreeing with the fundamentalists. You're agreeing with the fundamentalists, and you're pushing their narrative. You're pushing the Wahhabi narrative. And, I like Majid as a friend, but this is nonsense, okay? Because, sorry Majid if you're watching this. But, the reason why it's nonsense is because it's like, if you go to somebody and say, like, they read Mein Kampf, and you're like, yeah, this is very anti-Jewish and racist and very, yes, it's very anti-Jewish, right? So you could tell them like, wait, so you think Mein Kampf is anti-Jewish. So you agree with the Nazis that Mein Kampf is anti-Jewish? So you're agreeing with the Nazis. The main difference is that we think that it's not okay to be anti-Jewish and they think it's a good thing. The fact that we read the same text and we can clearly say what it says, that similarity is not as important as the fact that Wahhabis think that it's okay to beat your wife and we think it's horrible. That's the difference that you should be focusing on, not the fact that we both drink water, that's very nonsense, right? The last thing actually two more things. Two more things. A lot of people say like, I mean baby steps, okay? Yeah, fine. Atheism, anti-religion, doubt, but reform could be a gateway to atheism. It could be a step, some people are not comfortable, they're not ready for atheism. This could be a step in between. I tell them, if you want baby steps, you don't need to lie to people. Doubt, as I mentioned, is a baby step. I'm not saying that we should only accept atheism and anything other than atheism is not acceptable. The seed of doubt, just a time, nobody is going to dedicate their life entirely to something that they're only 99% sure about. Okay? The difference between promoting doubt and skepticism rather than actively lying to people about what's in their scripture is one of them is intellectually honest and the other one is not. One of them is providing cover for Islam and the other one is not. The last thing is, people tell me that, this is what you're trying to do is unrealistic and you're being hateful. And I don't understand what, you're being very anti-Islamic and this is not being tolerant of other people's views and ideas, right? And it's unrealistic. You can't make people leave Islam. First of all, we have thousands of people we have made leave Islam. We are responsible for it. And these are only the people that we know of. As other people mentioned here, there are astronomically higher numbers that they can't even mention that they have left Islam. And another thing, a better way to say is that even if you are not against Muslim, you say you're against Islam. You're not against Muslim. You're against Islam. Fine. But what you're saying is giving narratives to the bigots, to the people that actually hate the Muslims. The things that you're saying is fueling their narratives. I say, okay, fine. So you know what else helped the far right? The Nazis. You know what the Nazis use as their narrative? Evolution, right? They use evolution as a way to push their white supremacist narrative. So should we stop teaching evolution? Maybe instead of when people use the truth and misuse the truth to push their hate narratives, maybe we should fight the misuse rather than the truth. We should never back down on spreading the truth just because somebody is misusing it. Fight the misuse, not the truth. We can win this by, but first of all, another thing I want to point out is that we want to go on the offense. A lot of people here like, oh, Islam is coming, we need to defend ourselves against Islam. I'm like, no, stop defending yourself against Islam and attack Islam. We need to go, if they're spreading their ideas to us, we need to go and spread Enlightenment ideas to them. And we need to go to the source. We need to go to Islamic communities here and in Islamic countries, and we need to spread our values instead of just defending ourselves against their values. And we need to focus on the children. And I tell Muslims, we're coming for your children. They don't like it when I say that. And another thing is, like I mentioned in the Q&A section, we need, in the few countries that we still have Enlightenment values, you need to only accept, when you actually accept refugees, please make sure they're actually the refugees, and please make sure they actually accept these Enlightenment values. And when you bring them here, provide them a platform to fight the destructive ideas, here and also back home. This is a win-win for both countries. If you accept ex-Muslims and other refugees that are promoters of Enlightenment values, first of all, you're not risking your own country, and also you're providing a platform for people here to attack anti-Enlightenment values back home. Last one, I promise. Okay? With regards to the ex-Muslim, us being unrealistic and our ideas not working, we have, again, the reason why the reform movement gets so much support and the ex-Muslim doesn't is because what we say is not politically correct. Right. We think Islam needs to die, but these other reform people are saying that, hey, there's hope for Islam, and these governments and non-profit agencies are like, yeah, those, what you're saying seems racist and stuff, so we're going to give all the funding and all the media and everything to them. And the interesting thing is, with all the attention and the resources they got, they have producers. They have shit to show for. They have nothing. They have no results. And with no attention, no resources, the ex-Muslim community has grown exponentially. Here, in Arab countries, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, in Turkey, in Iran, we have grown. You know why? Because we have the truth on our side. And the truth works. The truth works. If you're on the side of the truth, eventually you will win. Europe is betraying Enlightenment values. One last sentence. Europe is betraying Enlightenment values, right? And we are fighting for it. And we are here, with or without your support. We don't want reform. We don't want a new version of Islam. We want to end Islam. Yeah. We want enlightenment. And if you are going to betray your enlightenment, we're not going to give up on our version of enlightenment in the Islamic world.
So, wir kommen jetzt langsam zum Ende. Ich will noch mal abschließend ein paar Worte sagen. Ja, wir möchten noch abschließend ein paar Worte sagen. Die Versammlung, die wir heute gehabt haben, die wir eine Ex-Muslim-Konferenz genannt haben, war von seiner Qualität die erste. Und wir haben viel gekämpft, dass wir diese Teilnehmer nach Deutschland überhaupt bekommen konnten. Ich will nur noch mal ganz kurz ein paar Punkte zusammenfassen, das dauert 2 Minuten. Ich hoffe, dass heute bei unseren Besuchern klar geworden ist, dass es hier Vertreter gegeben hat, die keine Reform des Islam wollen. Wir haben auch keine Sehnsucht nach einem Dialog, wo wir alle dann im Bett liegen mit dem Islam und schmusen und so tun, als wären wir jetzt verheiratet mit dem Islam. Wir wollen keine Reform. Unser Job als Ex-Muslime mit echter Erfahrung, was diese Religion aus uns gemacht hat, wenn die Leute, wenn ihr verstanden habt, was er gesagt hat, der ist aus dem Fenster gesprochen. Ja, der hat gedacht, es ist besser, ich bringe mich vor meinem 15. Lebensjahr um und bin dann bei Onkel Allah und mache da Urlaub für ein ganzes ewiges Leben lang. Diese Religion hat alle von uns auf irgendeine Art und Weise infiziert. Wir haben kein Interesse, dass der Islam behandelt wird wie eine Religion, wie eine Anschauung, wie eine Anschauung wie irgendeine andere. Wir haben es hier mit einer Weltanschauung zu tun, die völlig anders ist als irgendetwas, was wir im Moment auf diesem Planeten hier an Ideen finden. Wir haben nur eine Politik, die uns weismachen möchte, dass es da draußen Verbände gibt, mit denen wir reden können und die uns dann irgendwo einen verträglichen Islam verkaufen, mit dem wir dann angeblich zu leben haben. Deswegen danke ich, dass wir es geschafft haben, durch die Initiative an der Basis, diese großartigen Leute heute überhaupt hierher bekommen zu haben. Und das geschieht auch nicht ohne Risiko. Und viele Muslime werden diese harsche Kritik, die wir auch alle wissen, ist eine harsche Kritik. Sie werden das missverstehen als einen Kampf gegen ihre Religion. Und wir werden als Ex-Muslime deswegen aber auch nicht aufhören, weil uns nicht nur unser Leben in diesen Breitengraden von großer Interesse ist, sondern wir haben gestern darüber gesprochen. Wir wollen, dass jeder Einzelne, der hier sitzt, weiterhin sein Leben leben kann, wie er möchte. Und wir sehen alle die Gefahr, dass mit der Expansion der Religion in unseren westlichen Breitengraden, und wir sehen, was wir in den islamischen Ländern erleben, dort gibt es bereits ein riesiges Shithole, verursacht durch den Islam, und wir wollen nicht diese Shitholes da, wo wir immer stets gut gelebt haben. Und deswegen danke ich jedem Einzelnen, dass er heute gekommen ist und dass er so eine klasse, dass sie so eine klasse Botschaft abgeliefert haben.